Today, we're tackling one of the most iconic sci-fi films of the 1980s, Robocop. It's full of satire, bombastic music, and practical effects, so there's plenty to discuss. How well does it hold up in 2024? Spoiler, very well. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. It's really quite that simple. And on this episode, partly because at the end of the year we're going to be doing a top 25 sci-fi movies in the 1980s, one of the biggest, in fact, I'd argue the biggest 80s sci-fi movie that hasn't been done yet on the show is Robocop. So today, we finally do Robocop. You're welcome.
Just a little movie, tiny thing, barely made a dent in the public consciousness.
You may have heard of it. It might have stood the test of time. I mean, came out in 1987. It's directed by Paul Verhoeven. Obviously, it was a very satirical film. We'll start spoiler-free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get the spoilers, just in case for some reason you are someone who's not seen Robocop and is checking out the start of this show. Just in case, we'll follow the format. But before we get started, I'll just say that if you are enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube, and of course you can get some bonus shows from me and David on Patreon. I'll tell you more about them at the end. But yes, Robocop, the simple tale of a man named Alex Murphy who is hit with many, many bullets and then is turned into a cyborg. He is part man, part machine, all cop. That's just from the poster. I didn't make that up. It's just such a good tagline.
That was impressive if you did manage to pull that right out.
No, that's from the tagline. It's one of the best movie taglines on a poster I've ever seen. So,
yeah.
So I'm taking it. I'm using it. We're talking about the movie. It's fair game. I have a question actually, because I don't actually remember the answer to this. Had you seen Robocop before?
I had not seen Robocop in its entirety. I had, of course, seen some of the bigger moments from it. Pretty much the whole third act and the first scene involving the Ed 209 were things that are very vividly in my memory before coming into this. But no, the entire movie top to bottom was not something I had sat through before. So this was an experience for me.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a lot. Because this is a movie that I did see very young. And I think what's interesting about it is...
That explains so much.
I think what's interesting about it, having grown up with it, is that the reasons why I liked it when I was young, and by young I mean a child, are very different to why I think it's so great as I got older. Like once I was over that 18 thereabouts threshold, I started to like really appreciate it in a way that I thought it was even better than before. So we'll get into a lot of why that is as we talk about it, but it's got a lot going on. I think Paul Verhoeven in general is a director where I saw a few of his movies when this was definitely the first one I saw, and none of the other ones were quite as young, but I think a lot of those movies I've appreciated more in my adult life than I did when I was younger. I think there's more, because it's not just a straight action sci-fi movie, there's more to it than that, and I think a lot of that subtext doesn't really hit you until you're old enough to understand it. So
yeah, I haven't watched a lot of Verhoeven. Just looking through his filmography here, Total Recall's of course one that I've seen in my adult age that I've recognized the quality of. I haven't ever actually gotten around to Starship Troopers. I know that's one that I need to get to, so I will check that out. But of course the sci-fi masterpiece of Showgirls has also escaped me as well.
I never said all of these films were sci-fi. I just meant this one.
I know. I just saw that on the filmography list. I'm like, one of these things is not like the others, and I don't know why it's here.
If anything, most of his filmography is like thrillers and dramas. There's just a few notable sci-fi movies.
I would say up until Robocop, The Fourth Man sounds vaguely familiar, but everything else just I don't think I've heard of any of them.
Oh, it's because it was movies he made in his home country. So this is when he sort of transitioned into doing Hollywood movies. And I don't really know much of his earlier stuff. There's a few of his more recent films where he went back to making movies. I'm forgetting where he's from. I want to say he's Dutch. I think he's Dutch.
Dutch.
I want to see Benedetta because that looked kind of good. I know Black Book got some acclaim when it came out, but I haven't got around to any of these yet.
That's fair.
Oh, pardon me. So yes, anyway, we'll get in. I'm excited to talk about this one. It's a biggie, and we'll get into it. So I'll just start with a simple question, and we'll talk about cast and stuff in a bit. But
Yes.
David, what did you think of Robocop?
So, knowing what little I knew about it, I was expecting a lot of the good old ultra violence. I was expecting a lot of those scenes of people being shot up and explosions and stuff like that.
On this topic, actually, just before you get to the actually answering the question I just asked you,
Yes.
is that there's a director's cut of Robocop, right? And this was something that kind of came out into the world in the DVD days. And it's not that different. There's not tons that have been added to it. But as I was sitting down to watch Robocop today, I went on iTunes. There was no indication of any kind that it was anything other than the original cut, which is a shame because the one or two things that it does add, I think, are better, or I think add something to it, add something to the satire. And it turned out I was indeed watching the director's cut. I feel that the director's cut in most places has just replaced the original cut, and they just don't even bother telling you anymore. So I'm very curious. There's one particular scene that we talk about that I'll be able to tell if you watch the director's cut or the theatrical cut.
Okay, all right. I mean, I watched whatever's available on Max. Max is...
It may be the director's cut. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how ultra-violent one particular scene got, and if it did, then...
All right. Fair enough.
We'll have the answer. But you brought up the violence, but there you go.
Yes. But no, so going into it, that's kind of what I was expecting throughout. And I'm not going to say it didn't deliver on that. There was definitely a lot less than I expected, but it was there. I think just to blanket get out there, I did enjoy this movie. I did think it was a very well-made one, but I think what surprised me the most in it is the way it told the story outside of RoboCop, like the way it was setting up the world. I found really impressive because it's done via multiple different means, but a lot of it is this sort of TV style thing where there's a news reports and then we cut to like commercials interspliced between, and it does a really good job of setting up the world without it ever actually just being expository, if that makes sense. Like we have this news thing which mentions stuff about like, oh, a satellite like went rogue or something like that, or there's nuclear tensions between these countries or whatnot. And it doesn't ever impact the story. It's never something that like actually tells you, oh, here's something that RoboCop's going to have to do. It's just setting up this larger world in a way that I find super interesting because it's essentially just taking a snapshot of the news from this day, and that's all you get. That's sort of like the theming of the world here. So no, I found that super impressive storytelling wise, and then special effects, all that sort of stuff. It does great throughout. I can't, some of the stuff like the stop motion on the Ed 209 is a little bit janky, but it works so well for what it is that I can't complain about it at all.
Oh, there's a charm to it. Like I smile, I have a big grin on my face when I see that jerky big thing, you know, moving around. I love RoboCop. I mean, it's something that has gotten better for me as I've gotten older, as I've been able to kind of like get to the heart of the story. Because there is a really, I think, because I'm not a big Starship Troopers guy, right? And I got a lot of flack when I did that movie with Tara because I'm not in love with that movie. And I think the big difference between RoboCop and Starship Troopers for me is that in Starship Troopers, you're basically following a bunch of white supremacists, and that's your characters. You know, more or less. Like, it's not exactly that, but it's kind of, you're kind of following characters that it's hard to root for. But I think RoboCop still, with all of its satire, there's still a human story with a heart at the center of it that you can very much, you know, attach to. You can care about. You can care about the character of RoboCop. You can care about what he's going through and about what his story tying into the themes of the movie is actually saying and what it's actually all about. So I think RoboCop just fires on all cylinders in that sense. And also, I know we usually leave this till later, but oh my god, the music! Oh, Basil!
Yeah.
Oh, the score it's like a top 10 movie score of all time. It's silly good.
I did notice that there's a scene where he storms into a warehouse and like the main theme starts playing. I'm like, why has this theme been slept on so much? I never hear anybody talking about the RoboCop. This is a solid like hero theme.
It's got layers as well. There's some dramatic moments where there's like more emotional versions of the theme that come in that are so good. It's great. So yeah, we got Peter Weller playing Alex Murphy, aka RoboCop. pretty much the role that I mainly know him for. I've seen him in other things over the years, but nothing that's ever like I don't feel like he ever became like a huge star where I associate multiple roles with him. Like he's in other things for sure, but I associate him with RoboCop.
Yeah, I've looked as soon as I was done with the movie, I looked through his list, and there's nothing that stands out as like, oh right, Peter Weller from anything besides RoboCop. Like it's all like little tiny single roles that pop up. Apparently, he was in the remake of Poseidon Adventure, so just tying into our other show we did. But
I haven't seen the remake of it, but fair enough.
Neither have I. But no, it's all of these things are either probably big roles in small movies or small roles in big movies.
Yeah. Nancy Allen is Officer Lewis. She... It's funny because I probably knew her from this first, but I've kind of come to associate her more with a lot of Brian De Palma films because she's in a bunch of those. Okay. But she's great. She's popped up in a bunch of things. She's definitely more of a supporting role here, but she's very good in general. But there's a lot of memorable faces in this. One of the sort of the villainous executives is Ronny Cox, and I loved that they gave an actor named Cox the name Dick just to... I know there's just some theming there between the actor and character that they've synced up, which is just lovely. So you've got that. You've got Miguel Ferrer, who's great in this. This, again, is mainly what I know him from, although I also associate him with Twin Peaks now, because he's in Twin Peaks and any...
That's where it was. I was looking at his face. I was like, I know you. Where are you from?
Yeah, a lot. He basically shows up with a very similar attitude in the original Twin Peaks, but then he was actually also in Twin Peaks The Return, the third season in 2017, and he actually passed away. I think it might have even before it aired, or during it was airing. Like, it was like, I'm pretty sure we knew by the end of that season finishing that he was already gone. It was very...
2017 was when he died.
Yeah, that's when it was airing. I think we knew, if not before it started, and certainly somewhere during, because I remember it feeling like really fresh. Okay. But he's in a ton of that. It was because I remember thinking, oh, it's really nice to see, because I wasn't expecting him to have such a big role, but it was kind of nice because he just passed away, and it was like, oh, it's nice that he actually had a lot of screen time. I thought he was going to be here for like a cameo, basically, and he was kind of a recurring proper character, so that's cool. Speaking of Twin Peaks, he's not the only Twin Peaks actor in this. We also have Leland Palmer in here. Ray Wise is one of the villains, not the main villain, but one of the villains, one of the group.
Yeah, I was actually kind of amazed that he was here as small of a role as he was. Like, obviously Ray Wise has never been like a huge big name actor, but based off of the proximity to Twin Peaks after this, I assumed he was already somewhat of a bigger name, and he wasn't just going to be like lackey number 3 sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is before Twin Peaks, though, and I mean, I don't know him from anything before this. So
No, before this, not at all. I've seen him in a few things afterwards, but it's, again, I feel like Twin Peaks was, pardon the pun, his peak.
Main villain's Kurtwood Smith, who most people probably know now from that 70s show, but he'll always be the bad guy from Robocop to me.
See, it's weird. I got my exposure to him in that 70s show, but it's not that far of a stone's throw. Like, I could see Red Foreman just snapping one day and just doing this.
He's very good at kind of sounding... What's the word I'm looking for?
Jovially menacing.
Yeah, he's kind of snappy as well, though. Like, he's got a harsh sounding voice. And then there's a few other, obviously, characters that round out the cast, although the names themselves of the actors aren't particularly notable, I would say, but
nah.
You've got the old man who runs OCP. We'll talk about what OCP is in a minute, but he's just credited as the old man. He doesn't get a name. He's simply the boss.
I mean, I kind of like that. I like that idea that you get high up enough in like a super mega company and they start viewing people as like figureheads rather than the individual itself. If you're just the head of the company, you're the old man.
Yeah. So... yeah, I mean, as far as to talk about stuff, I mean, the world building's really cool. It's set in Detroit, but they refer to it as Old Detroit because they're going to turn it into Delta City soon. That's like the big plan that OCP wants to do. They want to turn it into this new luxury place. And this definitely was the start of my assumption that Detroit is just a shithole, because this movie and in every other movie set in Detroit that I've ever seen have always presented it as, oh, it's basically just the ruins after a nuclear holocaust. There's a few houses left and some grimy areas, and that's it. That's all that's there.
Yeah.
Apologies to anyone from Detroit who's listening to this. I'm sure it's better than that, but movies have all taught me that Detroit looks a certain way.
Yeah. That was, I think it was during our Mad Max reviews that I said something along the lines of like, I don't know what is just normal for Australia and what is dystopian Australia. This is the same sort of level of, I don't know what's actually normal for Detroit and what is just made up for the movie, but it all feels pretty normal for Detroit.
Yeah, what's funny though is that this is set in like I mean, it didn't really specify like a year, if it's in the future or what, but it's kind of an alternate reality, Detroit. So it's not even like applicable, but then I still hear people crack jokes of like, oh, yeah, this just feels like Detroit.
Yeah.
This just feels like Detroit. It's fine. Oh, dear. So you've got all that going on. OCP have kind of like become the private owners of the police. That's like a theme that's running throughout the movie. Obviously, some of the bigger themes in this are commercialism, individuality, how the system uses you. There's also the general ideas of kind of we'll get into it. Corruption. I'll just say corruption now. Yeah. We'll get into it more in depth as we go through it properly. But I'll just try to sum up some of the broad ideas that are in here. But they're all very well explored. There's a lot of great little details in here that you notice when you watch it again. You know, there's a lot of little things, or certainly that you'll forget at least between viewings because there's so much to take in.
Yeah.
It's such a smart script. There's so many little details that you do pick up on repeat viewings because it layers in a lot of things very subtly in the dialogue where it doesn't really overemphasize certain things, but on repeat viewings you notice them setting things up in a way that's a bit more subtle. So I really appreciate that the more I've seen it as well. So
okay. Yeah, no. I mean, for me, again, this is my first time viewing it, but I really like the way that they develop his character over the course of the movie because there's a very obvious plot that it seems like it could go down in terms of, you know, you get somebody who turns into half robot, but there's still that human part fighting back. Obviously, there's a fighting to regain humanity sort of subplot going on, but I really like the way they deal with it in that it's not the focus, you know, that it's so easy for that story to become the primary thing, to make that the thing that's all the rest of the plot is based off of. But like the tagline says, all cop, like the story is first and foremost him getting criminals who break the law. And like the other stuff is more so just to better define his character and get you into the headspace that he's in rather than the actual plot that we explore throughout it.
Yeah. It does end at a really good emotional high note, though. I think it crescendos beautifully to its final moment. And
I don't want to spoil anything. I have never seen a more sudden ending to a movie. Like, it just hard cuts, and I'm like, oh, all right, guess we're done.
But it's perfect, though. It's not like it cuts in a moment it should cut on. Like, it makes its point, full stop. Like, we're proud of what we just did. Cut to title. Like it really does. Like that's how it feels. And I always,
it felt like the movie equivalent of a mic drop. Like they just said the big thing, and they're just like, boom, done. Bye.
That's actually the perfect comparison. It's a mic drop, and it's like cut to title, and you know, audience cheers probably. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in a movie theater in 1987. I was negative 2 years old, but
that sounds like you weren't committed enough.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just break the laws of biology, physics, and space-time, shall I?
Yep.
All right. Spoilers. I feel like this feels weird talking around details of Robocop.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've made it very clear that we both enjoy the movie, so if you care about spoilers at all, it's available. Check it out.
Yeah. It's not a hard to find movie by any means.
Nah.
So, yeah, okay, we'll get into it. So, spoilers for Robocop. You've been warned. We have plenty to discuss. The movie actually opens on, well, all on the big flashy title, opens on some of the TV stuff you were talking about.
Yep.
That's how it starts. What's funny to me is that most of the news stuff kind of like faded to me in the sense that I get the vibe of what they're talking about. The only thing that really stuck out of the news stuff, and I'll just sort of cover it all here, is that early on they mentioned that the Star Wars like satellite defense program is up and running, and the president's on the space station like doing an address to the nation from space. And then later on, there's just a quick story update in one of the later batches of news programs was like, oh, by the way, there's some mourning today in Santa Barbara because the space laser program accidentally fired at it and killed hundreds of thousands of people. It's a sad day for America. Like, oh, yep. Shit.
Killed 2 former presidents and God knows how many people in the Santa Barbara area. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, more after this. Yeah. So I like that because, of course, it ties into the themes and like it's literally just a bigger version of what happened with Ed 209 in the movie. So it fits in thematically with everything.
Yeah, but I really love the way that they structure that stuff because it's not like it's news and then like a super obvious plot forwarding like commercial or something like that is interstitial and then like back to more plot forwarding news. Like, yes, there is a level of exposition that's given throughout these segments, but like I think the first commercial in this is it's like a
is it the doctor with the heart?
Yeah, it's the doctor who's saying like, oh, you've got a big operation coming up. Come down to our place because we've got all these different heart things. And like, yes, you can view that as an exposition to the medical grade technology that we have in this future and how Robocop can like exist in that sort of sense. But I like it more from the viewpoint of the way that they structure the whole commercial. It's a medical doctor's office. And it feels like a used car salesman.
Oh, it does, yeah.
And it's just this idea of this is the level of commercialism and capitalism that we've gotten to in this world, where it's just everything is it's just cheaply sold and we're just trying to make a nickel off you no matter what the situation is.
If I was to say what's the most prominent thing in this movie, it is the fact that it's a capitalist like endgame nightmare. That's what this movie is, like, beyond anything else. And you're right, it's a used car salesman. But I think that's smart though. Like, I wouldn't disregard the part where it also slyly sets up the idea that oh, they have the tech here to just put in a fake heart. That's a lot like putting in a robotic part. So your mind starts saying, oh, they've got more options here. There's more science available for this kind of thing. So it does a great thing of both setting up the world, but also giving you a little bit to just make you believe what they can do later. Doesn't explain it overly, just makes you believe it a little bit easier because you're like, oh, we've already established they have fake hearts that they can just put in people. And the bit that kills me is he's like, extended warranty. Well, what's the warranty going to do if I die because the heart fails?
It's not a matter of it fails. It's just once it starts making that weird clicking noise that you want to get taken care of.
I'm so happy that when I die because my fake heart exploded, my family will get a payout. Delighted by that news.
Well, my favorite bit of it is how they still have to keep up the act because they immediately, as soon as he says like, oh, extended warranty and financing options, and then like he goes to walk away and he turns back to the camera and like, and remember, we care. And it's like, all right, buddy, sure.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite commercial, just to get these out of the way just now, because they're obviously, as much as they feel like nice little interstitials in the movie, they're very separate, obviously, overall. It's the board game, it's Nukem.
Yes.
Because it's like Battleship, but I swear the line that always breaks me is when the kid goes, "You've not reduced your stockpile." As if that's one of the mechanics of the game, and then obviously there's a little nuclear explosion graphic over the board, and like, Nukem, the game for the whole family.
I was gonna say, I was expecting it to zoom out, and it's gonna be like some version of Risk, like it's some version of a game that is actually like geopolitical, whatever. But like, no, it's Battleship. That's literally, it's like they're just playing a 4-player version of Battleship, and then like you said, there's that little nuclear explosion graphic on there, and it's again. It's giving the detail of the world of just how, at this point in the world, desensitized the entire public is to things like nuclear violence. Like, it's been just something that's been in their lives for so long. There's board games about it.
Yeah. Well,
this is really good. Yeah.
I have nothing to add. It's perfect. Obviously, there's a couple of news reports that are more directly tied into the plot, so we'll just bring them up when we get to them.
Yes.
Talking about the police strikes and when Robocop shows up. And that's the other beautiful thing is that when Robocop is out in a public way and we get to the news report, it's sort of like further sort of taking that forward and really cementing this idea that everyone knows who he is now. It doesn't feel like an out of place thing where all of a sudden there's a news report. We've already seen like 3 news reports already, so it feels like a natural thing to jump to by that point. It's kind of an interesting choice. So, anyway, it's Alex Murphy's first day on the job. And one of the few things that was in the news report, actually, that was plot relevant, and I actually really like this, is that they bring up that there's been some cop killings, right? And there's one cop left fighting for his life. And that's something that's just brought up, and it's referenced again by some of the police as Alex Murphy's walking through the precinct for the first time, and he's been told where to go, and he goes into the locker room, and some of the cops are talking like, hey, maybe we should strike. You know, we're getting cleaned up out there. This is like getting too dangerous.
Yep.
And just after that, Sergeant Reed, who we've not mentioned yet, Robert DeQuee, if I'm saying that right, is the actor here.
Something's close to that, sure.
Who's very memorable from these movies. I don't know from anything else, but he's very memorable in these movies. But
oh yeah, I'm surprised he was up at the front desk, because he very much seemed to have that vibe of the captain who's going to take your badge and your gun. Like, he's the no nonsense sort of guy.
I think he is in charge, though. I think this is his precinct. At least I think he's at least in charge of all the uniforms. At least maybe he's not giving orders to the detective. I mean, is there detectives in this version of Detroit? I don't know. I didn't see any.
It's the future, man. Honest to God, the vibe I was getting once they said that OCP took over the cops was that they were running it like a company where they strip it down to the bare essentials so they don't have to pay any more than they have to.
Yeah, and actually just on that, I love the intentional choice to have OCP have the exact same letters of the word cop, just swapped around. It's just a nice little touch. They've literally flipped it on its head, if you will.
Yep.
But yeah, they're in the locker room, and just after they're arguing about the strike, Reed walks in, and he comes in, everyone goes quiet, but he's got another cop there with a box, and he just takes the guy's name off the locker, the one that was fighting for his life. And it never, like, obviously says there's a funeral, but like for the moment before he says that, you just get what this means, is that, yeah, this guy who was fighting for his life has died. This is the reality. The tone in the room completely changes, and just sort of continues that world building as we go on. And then we're introduced to Lewis as Murphy's getting ready to... Actually, no, maybe this is before, actually, because I think he might still be in his civvies when he sees this. But Lewis ends up fighting a perp out in the front of the police station, just to show she's tough and whatnot.
Yeah. We don't have no damsels in distress in this movie. She's a hardened cop who can handle her own. Well,
no, we have one later. She gets shot through the skirt. But
yeah, but I mean, like, that's just a random person. We don't have, like, the main girl be a damsel.
Sure. Oh, no. She is... She's never a love interest. In fact, Murphy even has a wife and kids, so that's never even something that's entertained. It's purely... She is a partner. She is the other cop. Yep. That's what she is.
It's the alien method where you can swap the genders, and the only thing you got to change is the name, possibly. And even then, with a name like Lewis, she's pretty much fine as is.
Yeah, because they're using her surname, so like they could just keep doing that. And it's not like you have to change Robocop. Maybe you change... I mean, even Alex could stay the same. It'd just be short for Alexandria.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go. You could just literally just swap them.
As we saw in Interstellar, Murphy is just as much of a girl's name as a boy's name. So there you go.
Now I want Nancy Allen as Robocop. That sounds like a great flip on the movie.
I'm not gonna lie, if we're in spoilers now, towards the end she gets shot up a few times. I thought that was gonna be like sequel bait. I thought they were gonna be like, and here's the 002.
Couple of I'm laughing at you saying that, because in Robocop 2 there's literally a new thing called Robocop 2. It's not just the name of the movie. There was a Robocop 2 in the movie. All right. But no, there's a couple of flesh wounds. She's fine. She's tough. Yeah. She's badass. That's the opening to the police stuff, and I do actually really like all that. There's a nice sense of chaos around the police station that I think it captures really well. One thing that this isn't like a big deal, but I think one of the things that makes this movie recognizable, and if I remember when I used to do screenshot games on stream, or no, I think it was one, because I think it was Tara that did it when they got it right. So it must have been like a quiz thing that I did with you guys. But the cop cars in this movie are so recognizable. Like, they're not even that unique, but there's just something about them that as soon as I see one of the cop cars in this movie, I just know it's Robocop.
Yeah, they've got like a matte black thing and the OCP logo. Like it's just different enough.
Yeah, because they're not super. They're not like weird futuristic cars where they're trying to feel like, oh, we're in cyberpunk or something.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's kind of a cyberpunk movie because there's a cyborg. It's kind of a big component of cyberpunk, but that's it.
I feel like it's flipping it on its head though, because obviously we're following a cop. So how much of the punk aspect could there really be?
I don't know. It feels grungy enough to be punky.
I guess it's more just cyber following the law.
I think you're taking the mean cyberpunk a bit too literally, to be honest.
I mean, fine, it's the Corpo branch of the cyberpunk
Because
aspect.
Terminator's also cyberpunk, and I wouldn't exactly say that's about, like, the punk hunter element of a city.
I would argue that I'm blanking on his name, and that's horrible of me. But the main guy, Reese, that's it.
Yes, Reese.
He's very punkish. He looks it. He fits it.
He doesn't have a punk bone in his body. I don't know what you're talking about. Barry, because obviously this movie focuses on the corporate, and this is where we shift to the introduction of the OCP characters next.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to love about this. Like, they do such a good job of introducing multiple characters very quickly. Bob, Miguel Ferrer's character, obviously is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got like a couple of lackeys here. The one who everyone remembers because he's the guy who like is in Robocop 2 as well. The other one, of course, doesn't make it to Robocop 2 because he doesn't last very long. But they're talking about the old man's, and they're talking about Dick, and Dick Jones is obviously someone who he's competing with. He's higher up in the company, and they're not happy about this meeting because they think, oh, we're having this meeting because Dick Jones has got the Ed 209 program ready, and he's going to show it off. And that is what the scene ultimately is. It's him showing off this prototype and whatnot. But it does a lot of world building very naturally with them complaining about their coworkers and what their aims are in the company that I thought was very effective. And every time I see it, I'm surprised just how much information they pack in here. That when you've seen it a few times, you take all of it in because you know where it's all going. The first time it may be a little too much, you know, to keep it all, but it's all there. It all tracks with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that was this segment. They were throwing out a lot of names, a lot of concepts very quickly, and I was a little overwhelmed going through it the first time here because I wasn't sure what all had to be absorbed. But by the time we get to the Ed 209 sequence and the immediate fallout from that, it immediately crystallized as to here's the stuff you need to care about. Here's these relations between the characters and like how, you know, Bob wants to screw over Dick and Dick is his higher up and whatnot. You get all that just through the way they like talk to each other. Like one or two lines from Dick, you understand he's Bob's superior. They don't like each other, but they are in the same like area of the company. And it's very well done.
And it sets up that obviously Dick's been doing the Ed 209 thing, but because it's been running behind schedule, the old man put out like, oh, we want some contingency things in the works. And that's what led to Bob starting the Robocop program because they both worked for the same division. They both worked for, it wasn't applied
security.
It wasn't applied science or security. It was something like that. It was combining those words though. It was like cyber, advanced security or something like that. I don't know. It was something to that effect.
I know security was in there. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but yeah.
So this is where we get the whole, here's the model of the new city. We're calling it Delta City. It's going to replace old Detroit, yada yada. And Dick Jones gets up. In fact, even before that, I want to mention all the ass kissing that happens here, where the old man says like one more sentence, and then Bob's just like, yeah, sir, yeah, oh, sir, you make me hard with your plans for the future. I love capitalism.
You over exaggerate, but not by much.
Not by much. Like he's laying it on thick.
Yeah.
But Dick gets up and introduces the Ed 209, and we get the glorious stop motion effect of this thing walking into the room. Well, it's sitting there still at first, and I think there is a life-size model of it because it seemed like it was just sitting there in the room with them when it wasn't moving to me.
I think you're right. There's also a sequence later on that I think uses the life-size model at least a little bit, but anytime it needs to move at all, they throw that thing into stop motion.
Oh yeah, I'm not surprised the actual thing can't move. Like I'm not surprised at all of that. But the famous scene here, the demonstration where he wants a volunteer to demonstrate that this thing can, be a police officer. So the other lackey, the one that came up with Bob, right? Right, the white guy. He is given a gun. There's like a box, like a velvet case with like a really shiny pistol in it, right?
Yeah.
Which I figure is here for this purpose. But I want to point out though, in the end of the movie, when we're back in this boardroom, that box with the gun's still there, because that gets it at the end of the movie. So is it just always sitting there? Is it just always this chrome pistol just in the room?
Yeah, they're firm Second Amendment believers, and they live in Detroit, so got to be prepared.
Yes, those punky villains could jump in at any moment. You have to be ready.
Yeah,
I have to be packing. So
up on the 47th floor.
Oh dear. I love the design of the building actually, because obviously they've got a great map painting outside of what this building's supposed to look like, and it's got this angled bottom, so it looks kind of a little bit futuristic. But even inside, the elevators are all like open window elevators, so you can see like the lobby as they're going up and down in the elevator.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this movie, because of the way that like the commercials and the news looks and stuff like that, it all feels still very 80s in a lot of ways.
For
it
sure,
doesn't feel like it moved past that point of like aesthetic. But then you get these map paintings and these buildings and stuff. And obviously we are supposed to be somewhat in the future. And I think the OCP building's like the biggest sign of that. It's the one where it feels the most futuristic on the inside.
Other than, of course, the cyborgs themselves.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think it's maybe just around the corner. It's that type of future. It's just a little bit ahead, undescribed. But yeah, so they have this guy pointing a gun at Ed 209, and he's like, "Oh, you're pointing a weapon at me, blah, blah, blah. Drop your weapon, you have 20 seconds to comply." And Dick's like, "Better do what he says here, better do what he says, Jim." And he's like, "Yeah, this is great." And he throws down the gun, he's got a big smile on his face, and then Ed 209 goes, "You have 15 seconds to comply." He's like, "Excuse me? Wait a minute, I'm fine." And everyone starts panicking, they're all running, and he tries to run up to some other executives, he starts screaming, "Help me, help me." And of course they push him back because they don't want caught in the crossfire. And we get Ed 209 with these two big machine gun cannon things that he's got his arms, just unloads into this guy. So, this is how you tell if you're watching the theatrical cut or the director's cut, right? And the theatrical cut, he gets shot a few times, and then when one guy yells out, "Can someone get a paramedic?" it's a very serious line, right? And the director's cut, you see like 3 or 4 shots of him being riddled with machine gun fire until he's practically a whole riddled pool on this model city.
Pulp.
Yes. And then someone says, "Can someone get a paramedic?" And the director's cut, that line's funny, because he has been destroyed so much that, of course, the paramedic's not going to help him.
So I looked up online real quick what the director's cut looked like here, because he does get shot a few times, and I thought that was maybe what we were talking about. I did not have this. I did not have the level of destruction that was set up in this scene.
Yeah, I think Murphy's death might also be a little neutered for you then as well.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I see in the director's cut, you get a very clear glimpse of his arm just flying off, which I definitely did not have.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a shame. It's a shame you didn't get the full gore. So something to seek out in a future rewatch. That is the director's cut.
I mean, that is something I said at the beginning, is that I was expecting the ultra-violence, and it was less than I expected. Maybe that's just because of the cut I got. Maybe I just didn't watch the right version.
To be honest, though, I don't think there's much differences beyond those like moments, though. I think it's very slim. But yeah, like the version they sell in iTunes, which is just Robocop, is just the director's cut. They don't even bother offering the other one. It's like, this is just the movie now. So
I mean, I'm looking at it. It looks like in terms of extra footage and time, it only amounts to an extra like 30 seconds over the course of the whole movie.
I mean, the extra violence has got to be like at least 20 of that 30 seconds, if not all of it. So yeah, so don't worry, you didn't really miss anything out story wise or anything like that. But still.
But yeah, no, for this sequence, even with that extra gore missing, and you're saying, that line comes off as funnier, I still thought it was a darkly funny scene throughout, because obviously the fact that he tossed it away, and then the Ed says you have 15 seconds to comply. There's a moment of terror in that line, but just to watch the people behind like the controls, to watch them just start like frantically pushing buttons and like ripping stuff up. I don't know. There's just something comedically timed about the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite part of it as well is that after this happens, it just cuts to the old man and he just puts his head in his hands like, "Oh, you F up, you dick."
Yeah, Dick basically just comes up and he's like, "All right, so there's a glitch or two. No big deal. We'll work that out." He's
like, "You call this a glitch?" I think what's funny is that the old man kind of comes across as kind of not a villain in this movie, because I guess just because he's compared to this asshole, so he just comes across as a much nicer dude.
I was going to say, this movie does a very strange thing where it, like, the tone of the movie is condemning the entirety of like the capitalist corporate system.
Yes.
But it, like, if you look at it, our protagonists and like the people that we like think are okay is the head of a giant corporation and a cop. And like, that seems counterthetical to exactly what the tone of the movie is trying to sell here, you know?
Well, I think the head of the company, sure. I think the cop thing's a bit more nuanced than that, though, because I think part of it is how, like, someone signs up to be a cop because they can believe they can do good, but then the entire system they think they're protecting turns against them and uses them and abuses them. Like, that's kind of the...
Yeah, you know. I mean, I guess this is back when, you know, the idea of, oh, we can actually design a good cop. We can design one that actually, like, believes in justice and follows the rules and essentially is Superman, more or less.
Yeah. So yeah, that seems great. Obviously, Bob swoops in and is like, "Hey, you know, this was a bit of a mess up, wasn't it, sir? But the Robocop program, we've got this cooking." And he kind of goes over Dick's head. He's supposed to go through Dick to like sort of convey this information, but he takes his chance, and they get an approval because he says, "Oh, we could have a prototype ready to go within 90 days." And he's like, "Excellent, get cooking. We're looking for candidates." And then, because the scene ends when he's in the elevator where he says, "Oh, we just have to wait for some schmuck to volunteer," and it smash cuts to Alex Murphy, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a cut. That's good editing, that," because it's like it has it in your mind. Because even in 1987, when you're going to see the movie, you're probably aware that Alex Murphy is going to become RoboCop just because he's been introduced that way. Of course he is. So it's a nice through line there between the scenes, which is really nice.
Yeah, the moment they give him any sort of focus, it's like, well, it's a good thing that you're just starting the job, because if you were 2 days from retirement, I can tell you exactly what was going to happen.
Well, he's only new to the precinct, to be fair. He's not a new cop, but it's a tough neighborhood, as we find out.
I was going to say, man, he lives out in the suburbs. I blanked on what his exact location was before and like how it was probably better than what he was starting with here.
It was just a different, because this is like the East Precinct, and he said he came from the South Precinct, so it's just a different part of the city.
Okay, so it's all just Detroit then.
Yeah.
Got it.
Some parts of Detroit are nicer, apparently.
Yeah, I was going to apparently the South Side, if he's moving over to the East Side. Crazy.
Yeah, I wonder what he did to get that reassignment. Like, who did he piss off?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like he treats it like he's just like, yeah, you know, standard stuff. This is just a normal thing. I'm like, I don't think you get reassigned to the bad part of town just on a whim, especially when you've got a wife and a kid. I feel like you piss someone off, man.
I think it is worth mentioning, though, in those opening scenes, to go back to them a little bit, he does have this kind of like just this good guy vibe where he's not as cynical and angry as all the other cops that are around, and maybe it's just a case of they've been in this shithole part of the city and they know how tough it is, and he's just like too naive to really get like how bad it is here yet. Obviously he learns the hardest way he could, but there's something to be said that he has this hopeful optimism compared to everyone else, which is, I think, also works for the character.
Yeah, I mean, once we cut back from the boardroom scene, the very first thing we see him doing is this spinning the gun on his finger trick.
Yeah.
And he explicitly tells Lewis, like, oh, I'm learning it because my son saw it on TV and he thinks that all cops should be able to do cool stuff like that. So he's immediately ingratiated to the audience of like, you must survive. Please, let nothing bad happen to this man.
But he also admits that he kind of likes it as well. Because that's the thing, she kind of pauses after he gives that excuse, and he's like, okay, I kind of get a kick out of it as well. I think I'm kind of cool. All right, that's you know. And then they get the call, of course, which sends them on their fateful mission. There's been a robbery. It's their main group of bad guys. They're in the back of a truck. They're upset that the money's burned. Although I will say, when I watch this scene, I get that they're angry that some of the money's burned, but when he starts throwing the money around, there's definitely a lot of bills that aren't that burned. I'm like, there's still a lot of money in here that's usable. Yeah.
No, top level, maybe top 2 levels. Toss those out. But other than that, you're fine, man. It's still hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So we get this scene where they're coming up behind in the car, and the one thing we know about this group is that they're happy to kill cops. In fact, the main bad guy, Clarence, played by Kurtwood Smith, has killed like 30 cops. They say that very early on. Yep. So they're ready to just start firing and blasting. They pull us some moves to try and drive up the side of the van as opposed to the back, because they're ready. When one of them gets hit, though, the guy who they're blaming for burning the money, we get one of the most memorable lines in the movies, "Can you fly, Bobby?" See, I shouldn't know that guy's name, but I do, just because of that line.
Yeah. I would say probably second favorite line that comes from Clarence in this movie, and he's got a lot of them, but I think the "Can you fly" was good. The favorite line comes later, involving some bitches.
Yeah, look, I mean that's most of the line as well. To be fair, it's only one other word, but yes.
Yep.
But yeah, they throw him out the back of the van onto the cop car, and I think what was funny watching this is that if Murphy and Lewis just said, "Okay, our windshield's been done in, like maybe we have to wait for backup now," things would have went very differently. But this is kind of what's endearing about them, though, is that they're very committed to doing their job and being good at their job, so they keep pursuing anyway, and they end up at this, I think it's an old steel mill or something like that, old factory.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to point out that when they get there, their windshield's been busted in, and it's Murphy who turns to Lewis and basically says, "It's your call. Do you want to do this now, or do you want to wait for backup?" And Lewis is the one who says, like, "Let's do it. We can go in. We can handle this." But yeah, no, it's like an old... Okay, so there is later on we see a giant vat labeled toxic waste.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that it's just a general whatever you need made sort of mill, because I can't imagine steel is going to make toxic waste like that.
It's the future.
Yeah, future steel's all toxic, of course.
Yeah, on that point though, that's a bit of guilt for Lois Slater then, is that she's the one that said, "Let's go in." Not guns blazing per se, but more or less, might as well have been. They split up, again, also a dumb choice. She bumps into Cox and he's got his cock out, funnily enough. He's pissing, and unfortunately, she gets distracted by said cock. Not in a skeevy way. He basically just says, "Can I zip this up?" And she just glances down for a moment, and he uses that moment to hit her. And she goes over the railing and lands down on some stuff.
Some boxes.
Yeah, she's fine. Whatever. She seems knocked out for a bit. He seems to think he's taking care of her though, because he doesn't seem very concerned with going and dealing with her later on. So when we go to Murphy, he actually takes out like this is the thing. There's a couple of extra members of this group who are here, but when I think of the group, I always just think of 4 of them, because it's 4 of them at the end of the movie, because that's the 4 that make it to the last act. But there's a guy here who just gets killed by Murphy like really early on, like, so we don't really get to know him.
We need enough people that we can show the mercilessness of Clarence and how he threw the one guy out the back of the truck, and B, we can show the competence of Murphy in being able to kill one of these guys before they shoot him. So immediately we had to bump this group up by 2 red shirts that we were never going to care about.
Yeah. It's a brutal scene though, especially in the director's cut. I don't remember what shots aren't in the theatrical one, but
I mean, I've got a comparison website here, but like long and short of it is, it's just it's still got some bloody brutal stuff, but there's a lot that is cut down rather than like fully shown as bad as it was. So like we see, I mean, to fully set it up, the rest of the gang shows up, they get the drop on Murphy, and then they blow off his hand, which is in both versions of this, but then they also just start taking turns at unloading inside of him, and in one of them blows off his arm, but that is not in the version I had, was the arm. But everything else here seems pretty much the same, just slimmed down a little bit.
They take turns in loading inside of him. That was the sentence you went with there.
You're the one who said distracted by the cock. I'm
I'm just saying the phrasing could have used some work there.
I watched one of your reviews earlier on. Oh no, it was the comics podcast that was earlier this week, and you said something about like, so he really shows off the girth of the thing, and I was like, are we not going to draw attention to that?
No, that's how you sell it. You just say it and move on with complete confidence.
Absolutely.
That's how it works.
Got it.
So yeah, I think I want to point out though is they kind of toy with him a little bit at first, right? They kind of like so he's kind of scared. He kind of realizes he's on his own. He's got no help coming. So there's kind of that sense of dread, and they really build up to the entrance because Clarence is the last one who arrives, and he kind of comes sauntering in with the shotgun over his shoulder. I think all these little details just give it this sense of menace. Like, they're not horror movie villains. They're too not goofy, that's not the right word, but they're enjoying themselves too much. They're not like these like super horror movie style of characters. Yeah. They're more scary in a sense that, no, these are just like thugs who are enjoying the shit they're doing, right? But they're dangerous, and you feel that danger as Murphy realizes he's on his own, that there's no help coming, and they toy with him, and ultimately, yeah, like Clarence blows off his hand with the shotgun, and then says he's all yours, and they just, it's like a firing squad. They line up and they start firing at him. His arm gets blown off, numerous bullet holes, and then when he's still kind of alive at the end, Clarence comes up and shoots him in the head. So he should be dead, right? And medically speaking, he probably is, barring a few maybe like electrodes firing in his brain or something for a little bit, just enough that he's suitable for the Robocop program, of course. But so I think this next section is really well done as well, because they made this choice to do, okay, we're going to do the next like 10 minutes are in POV, and we're going to show his POV as he's on the stretcher on the table, and they're trying to save him, but they can't. And then he's going to seemingly die, and there's going to be quick flashes of like who shot him, and the idea that these traumatic memories are sort of flashing in his brain. And then he's gone. But then when it comes back on, it's like a TV starting up. It's like a CRT TV turning on. And it's like the scan lines, and you're like, what's this? And it's like, you get these just little glimpses of the development cycle of them turning him into Robocop, where it's like, oh, here's like him seeing the arm be like tested with Bob try to shake the hand and stuff like that, or here's like the New Year's party where they're clearly towards the end of their development cycle because they're really excited about Robocop at this point, and the woman comes over and kisses him because they're proud of their work. But it just gives you this sense of this progression of like, they don't even care if he can hear them. It's like, oh, he's awake, can he hear us? Doesn't matter, we're going to wipe his memory anyway. Doesn't, he's just a product, he's not a human being anymore, we can do what we want. In fact, the maybe the best part of that is when Bob says, wait, why did you save the other arm? Lose it, we want all robotic limbs. It's like, that's a bit inhumane, isn't it, Bob? He's dead, he belongs to us.
Yeah, no, I love the legal justification there. Is basically like, look, this guy, when he joined the cops, he signed his contract with OCP, he became legally dead for like however long that was, and therefore we can do whatever we want to him. Because his body, his corpse, belongs to us. And if it just seems like he's alive now, that's thanks to us. But he ain't alive. He's a product.
Yeah. So eventually, like the end of this POV sequence is when he actually stands up and walks past some people. And they do a great job of teasing like what he looks like. Because you can actually see as he walks past the monitor, the back of his head a little bit. Like, because obviously they're filming him walking. And you can see just a little glimpse of it in the corner. But it all leads to them going to the police station, and this is another big part of the movie, is that the police aren't happy that OCP are in charge, and Bob and his goons just kind of walk in like they own the place and say, hey, we're taking like a couple of rooms, and like that's our base now, deal with it. And he really gets in Sergeant Reed's face, he shouts at him and says, hey, I'll have your job, I'll have your badge, like you work for us, deal with this. And they just saunter on in. But I think my favorite part of this little segment is that when they get the glimpse of Robocop, and obviously the moment itself's iconic where he's walking behind the frosted glass and you just hear the zhunt, zhunt, zhunt as he's walking. It's like, okay, you're building this, the way the camera's doing the crab, which is just moving from one side to the other on Reed's face as he's watching him walk past the frosted glass is just perfect, because it's like, you can see in his head that he's like, what the hell am I looking at? What is this? Yeah. But my favorite part of it is that a bunch of the cops who catch a glimpse of the back of them here all run because they realize where they're going and they know how to get there in a different like route. So they all run down to these other hallways to try and get to this other area so they can see him through the cages, because they're all excited. Excited is maybe not even the right word. They're all fascinated. Like, what is this? What's going on? So they all go running to get a glimpse of Robocop. And it really sells the idea of just how a big deal this is, that this thing's here and that it's new, it's different.
Oh, yeah. So for this whole sequence, I mean, it's so fast-paced. I don't think we can really overstate just how fast, like, everything is happening. Because you're saying, we get glimpses of the scientists doing this work on him. But it's very short. Like, we get 10 seconds, 20 seconds at every interval, and then it blacks out, skips ahead in the future. But I really like that for this sequence because it gives this sense of time passing. It gives this sense, I think the best thing they did there was the New Year's party, because it gives this idea of like, no, even if, we may have been around Christmas time already here, we don't know the time of year this started in, but because it specifically picked New Year's, it gives this idea of we've moved from one year into the next. It has been a while that Murphy has been killed. So by the time that we get to the final development of it, he goes into the cop station and stuff like that, you get this sense that all the bad things we saw happening before with like Boddicker and all the cops being killed and stuff like that, it's only gotten worse. It's only continued to get worse. And the OCP, rather than funding the cops that they already have or like providing more materials there, they've spent their time with Robocop. And so there's already going to be this little bit of fascination and whatnot about what it is all the money's been spending on. But also, as we see, like the idea of the police strikes and the idea of people being fed up that the cops being killed has only been exacerbated throughout this entire time that we've just been blanked out from the audience perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's at least been months. You know, that's the vibe you get from all this. And if anything, the biggest time jump is probably from when he dies to the first time he like turns on again. I would imagine that's the biggest time jump in that section. I could be wrong, but it feels like it would be the biggest just because that's probably the hardest bit to do, is to get him online again before you start screwing on all the other parts.
Especially, I think that first part, they already said how they replaced pretty much everything in his body except for his head and brain. Like you said, the arm was there, but everything else is cybernetic.
Yeah, so yeah, like we get like the famous shooting range scene where like the camera goes up past everyone shooting, which is a really fun shot because all I could think about was like, man, like the cameraman's literally going past everyone firing these guns. Now I'm sure that as he's walking past them, they stop firing, right? So they're not like, and you know, there's no risk of a Alec Baldwin situation going on. Regardless of how safe it otherwise is, which I'm sure it should have been, but you know, it goes down the line till it gets to Lewis, right? So this is our sort of reintroduction to her. She's still in the force, she's still here, and then she stops, and everyone else stops eventually because they hear this gun, this like triple fire auto pistol that's really big, and they all go down the side to where Robocop is, and he's firing the gun. And the moment which lets her know who this is, if she, you know, even if she wasn't going to recognize his mouth, which you can still see, of course, with the outfit,
right,
is that he spins the gun before he puts it back into his leg. Which, by the way, the fact that his leg opens up to pop out the gun's great.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's great
stuff. I love all the little design flourishes they have for RoboCop. Like, yes, you could have just made him like chrome and just give him some plate armor and call it a day or whatnot, but they made some specific element choices, like the holster being up inside his leg rather than just attached to it, that makes it so much more fun.
Yeah, it's a really cool, it's a really iconic design at this point. It's almost hard to like discuss it in any meaningful way because it's like, it's just always been how RoboCop looks to us. You know, we grew up in a world where RoboCop already existed, so it's weird to even sit and critique it.
That's the point where you were saying, like, oh yeah, beside the cyborgs making it feel futuristic. But because we've had RoboCop since 87, like, it doesn't feel like a futuristic design. It feels like RoboCop has always been with us. This is what robots have looked like since the 80s, you know?
Oh yeah, but I mean, keep in mind, if you went to see this in 1987, it would have felt futuristic. Right. But
yeah, and that's hard to parse that.
Yeah, this is just retro future, but it wasn't retro future at the time. It's just retro future in hindsight.
It was current future, the same way nowadays everything's white and shiny and transparent.
I think current future is just future.
You say that, but then as soon as we get to, like, you know, the year 2040 or whatever, they're going to show like, oh wow, it was so weird that we thought back in the 2020s that things were going to look all white and shiny. I'm
not arguing that it won't be proven wrong whatever movies do now to show the future. I'm saying that relevant to present day, current future is just always future.
True.
Yes. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that movies are getting it right and that everything. That said, though, all these movies that make everything look like Apple designed everything, they're probably closer to reality than what these movies in the 80s were. It just feels like for some reason they're still trying to develop transparent tablets and like screens, and I'm like, no one wants this, but you're determined to do it. Internet or world.
The moment that we actually get a transparent tablet in modern day and it fails super hard, I can't wait to see what we'll pivot to in sci-fi movies.
Hey, I'm all for getting back to buttons. I want tactile buttons.
Yes, absolutely. One thing I did want to bring up, though, during the cage scene where they're getting him all set up, this is where we get his prime directives.
Oh, yes.
And we get the three prime directives are serve the public trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. And we see that throughout there. But we do get the little bit of plot set up, the Chekhov's gun of there's a secret fourth classified prime directive that no one seems to know about. And that's just, that's sitting there waiting to go off like a bomb whenever it comes up.
Yeah. So his big exit, or his big debut, if you want to call it that, is Bob just says to Sergeant Reed he needs a car, so Reed throws some car keys over, but Robocop intercepts and grabs them and says thank you. And it's kind of the start of the personalization of Robocop, where I feel like there is a little bit of a, what's the best way to describe this? There's just a slight tinge of attitude from Robocop, right? He's very robotic, of course, right? But I think there's something interesting about the performance from Weller, where there's this kind of like, not smugness, because obviously he's not smug or whatever, but he does have this just slight thing of like, he expects cooperation, and when he says thank you, I'm not saying he's doing it in a way that says F you, but there's almost kind of a, I don't know. I know what I'm trying to describe here, but it's very subtle.
I think I get it. Yeah. I mean, the way that it rubbed off for me is that the instigation of the spinning of the gun was from the kids seeing that like cop character on TV.
TJ Laser, I want to say the show was called. It was what?
Sure. But regardless, it strikes me as him putting on that sort of act of being like so cool as a TV character sort of thing, where, you know, he just grabs the keys out of midair, keeps walking, like, you know, it feels like he's putting on that theatrical air.
I've never thought about this, but I think this is I really like this point, this idea that part of the personality that he has as Robocop, as subtle as it is kind of based on the character he's kid-like. I actually really like that idea. We never see the character really in any meaningful way to know if it matches. But I do like that idea that he's acting like a superhero almost with these like confidence, because he's living up, even if he doesn't realize it, he doesn't remember his family, at least not yet. On some deep emotional level, he's being the hero that he thinks his kid would want him to be, even now as a cyborg. And
it's the same reason he had the gun spin already. Even if he was blanked out entirely, having that gun spin is the thing that his kid wanted him to be.
Which obviously is very sweet, and it's the heart of the movie. It's this idea that the human's still in there, despite the fact they think they've stripped it away and he's just their product now. No, he's still a human. And obviously the satire, the meaning of this is pretty straightforward in terms of, like, you know, analyzing it. It's the idea that you become part of the system, you just become one of their numbers, you're just there to serve your purpose.
You're a product.
Yeah, you're not a person anymore. And this movie makes it literal, because he becomes a cyborg, he's literally their product. But by the end of the movie, and this is why the final line is him finally saying his name, is him regaining that individuality. It's him saying, no, I am me, and that is more important than what I am to you. And like, so it's beautiful stuff. So yeah, he drives out into the city. We get like a kind of a series of sequences. The first one, and this is where the main theme properly plays for the first time as well. There's two parts to the main theme, and everyone always does the da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na. Everyone always does that bit, which is great. But the second part I also really like, which is the dun 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 dun. That's a really dramatic part, I feel. But anyway, the first crime he tackles is a guy with a machine gun who's trying to rob a store, like a small corner store.
Yeah, just a convenience store.
Sorry, that's the American term for it. Convenience store. We call it a corner shop. They're not always in the corner of a street, but they usually are.
You weirdos.
So this guy's been very threatening. He's threatened to blow up this couple who run the store. The safe's in under the cans of beer. And then Robocop comes in. And my favorite thing about this scene is that this guy, not only does he say F me when he sees Robocop and knows that he's screwed, he keeps
like 20 times.
He keeps saying it as he fires his gun at him. He's like, F me, bang, 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 F me, bang, bang, F me. He just keeps yelling it and hoping that he can do something. And then Robocop defies the laws of physics by bending the end of the gun. I say he defies the laws of physics because technically equal force would have to be applied to the other side of the gun so that he could bend it. Like, because really what should happen is this human should just, like...
Yeah, he should just fling upwards.
A seesaw.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's a minor quibble, but it makes for fun.
I'm watching it just trying to figure out if there's any way, like maybe if he was holding it like one end in his hand and he bent it down with his thumb.
I could see that. Because there's actually a similar moment in The Dark Knight where I remember people debating, because there's a moment early on in The Dark Knight where Batman, like, he's got like a mechanical thing in his hand, like a tool, and he sort of cuts the end and bends the rifle from one of the bad guys. And I think the argument at the time that I do think makes sense is that the device he's using is making an incision, like where the bend is, so that it's cutting it first, so it's easier to bend it. At least that was my headcanon at the time, because that's what makes it make sense. But it does. It did make me think of this scene in Robocop, because it's kind of a similar thing. It's less cheesy in that movie.
Yeah,
but, it's.
I mean, I'm literally looking at it. He grabs like the very tip of it and bends it down like at the base of the barrel of the gun. So there's no possible way he made an incision or anything.
No, I meant in Dark Knight, not in this.
No. I'm just saying there's no headcanon workaround here. The guy should just be flung up into the air.
Yeah. But still, fun scene. And then Robocop's just like, thank you for your cooperation. And then walks out. Oh, dear. And then the famous scene with the woman who's been attacked by the two guys.
Yes.
And he comes up and... we get the big cinematic entrance here where you see his shadow against the alley wall at first, and then but what everyone remembers though is he shoots through the woman's skirt and shoots the guy in the dick, and then the second guy quickly surrenders.
I like it because it specifically shows, like, these two ones are specifically chosen for the first things we get to see, and I think there is one more after this as well.
Oh yeah, the big mayor one's next, yeah.
Right, the mayor one, but they specifically chose these ones to show the order of operations of, like, what is he willing to do and not willing to do as a cop.
Yes.
Like, it would be very easy to show, like, okay, is he willing to sacrifice the innocent if it means catching a perp? And they specifically show, no, that's not something that he's willing to do. He has to protect the innocent as one of his prime directives there.
Yeah, that's higher on the list than uphold the law.
Right.
I think.
Exactly.
Right? That's the idea, yeah.
Yeah, and they specifically chose these three to show not only how hyper competent he is and good at what he does, but also where he has to make certain decisions and how he has to choose what he does carefully as to keep all of his directives in line.
Yeah, and you see him like targeting and sort of trying to aim through the skirt, and so you see where he's going with it, and it works out. But of course, the woman runs up and tries to hug him afterward and say thank you because she's like traumatized and she's scared. And Robocop just turns and very coldly says, "You have been through a trauma. I will contact a local rape crisis center."
It's just like hard cuts after that too. It's not even her reaction or anything. It's just like, Ed, he's driving again. All right.
Yeah. Well, I think this is almost pointing out, like, if we could have a cold robot that would obey the law and like uphold it in a way where there's no chance of corruption, like, is taking out the human element a good thing necessarily? Would you rather have a human who could comfort her here in the moment, or is this good or is this bad? I guess, like, I'm not sure there's a good answer for it, to be honest.
I mean, I'd say utilitarian wise, being able to stop the crime before it happens, that's already like miles ahead of any cop that already exists.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it gets results. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next sort of big example, and this is the more public one where people actually witness what he does, is there's a hostage situation at the mayor's building. One of the, like, a senator or
councilman,
yeah, whatever the rank was, has went nuts and has taken the mayor and a few other people hostage. So there's a whole hostage thing. There's a bunch of like SWAT team and cop cars outside the building, and Robocop just comes sauntering up, and the head of the SWAT team is very upset because the press were talking to him, and as soon as Robocop steps out of the car, they all just abandon this guy and just run over to Robocop and try and ask him questions.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you? If you're talking to just some random Joe Schmo, and then all of a sudden a cyborg steps out of a car, you'd be like, well, hold on real quick. I want to check this out. If
it's the world's first cyborg, then yeah, I mean, the guy can't really complain. This is news.
Yeah.
This is a big deal.
I will say this did make me question, though, whether or not this was all just like his first night or if this was a collection of over time, because obviously directly following this scene, we get the news report of like Robocop is making waves and here's him meeting with children and whatnot. But it did seem to me like the cops on this SWAT team were like used to Robocop. They seemed like they were like aware of who he was and his position of power here of being like an OCP project. So did you get that vibe too, that this was like over a period of time rather than just a single night?
No, I took it as one night. I think if there's any feeling that they don't react enough to him, the SWAT team that is, I would say that's maybe just a slight nitpick of like the performance or the direction of their performance. Because it does feel like the big grand opening night to me of him going around and like, okay, this is the big capper on it to me.
Yeah, and that's what up until this scene, that's what I was thinking was it was just the opening night because that's the way they play it. But then, like again, all the reporters immediately walk over, and yes, it could just be because he's a cyborg, but I also got the vibe of like people have heard about Robocop, people have heard of the cool things he's doing.
There might have been rumors, like, you know, because OCP are prepping something and like, oh, there's some you know, prototype thing coming, but no, I still got the vibe this was the same night as everything else. To me, it's when it goes to the news report after and we see him with the school kids and stuff, stay out of trouble. That stuff feels like that's the time jump. That's your like, okay, he's out there for a few weeks now and like people are knowing who he is and whatnot. I love the negotiation scene here though, because Robocop says to the SWAT guy, keep him talking, and just walks in the building. So the SWAT guy's like got a megaphone and he's like, hey, Phillips or whatever his name is. What do you want? Don't hurt the mayor. What's going on? He's like, I want a recount, and no matter how it turns out, I want my old job back. And the SWAT guy's like, sure, we could do that. And I'm like, okay, he's going to know your bullshit if you just say yes to that. Come on now.
Look, I hope that I never have a mental breakdown to the point where I get into a situation like this. But I also hope that if I do, I have the mental recognition that I'm not making it out of there with any like normal sense of life continuing on. Like the fact that this guy holds all of his coworkers hostage and expects to be able to show up on Monday. That's the part that's I'm like, yeah, buddy, sure, that's going to happen.
Yeah, my favorite part is though, he's like, I want a fast car that gets shitty mileage. Right? And he's like, sure. He's like, and I want reclining leather seats. And then the SWAT guy like,
you want cruise control?
Yeah, the SWAT guy suggests a specific car, which I'm only one. It's just funny because it's again it ties into the whole capitalism and commercialism kind of satire that the movie's doing. But I'm pretty sure it's the exact car that later on Cox has when he gets out of prison that gets blown up. Because I just remembered the number because it's like something 5,000, and I remembered that number being brought up again.
It's the whatever 6,000, but the best part is the letters at the end are SUX. Like it literally sucks.
So yeah, Robocop uses his thermal vision to see through the wall, and he just reaches through the wall and grabs the guy and throws him out the window, and that's his big thing. I love the guy like firing his machine gun just as he's like being pulled through the wall. You know, Robocop, you're a bit lucky he didn't just, you know, a few stray bullets didn't hit someone. Like,
yeah, I feel like he ran the situations in his head, and it's just like, all right, he's not going to be able to hit anybody. I'll act fast enough. Yeah. He didn't. It was very slow, all things considered, but the shock value saved him.
Yeah, shock value, and I feel like the slowness of like the way that the arms come through the wall. It could have been a stylistic choice because they wanted to just make sure we saw his reaction as he was being grabbed, and that might have been the reason. Or it could have just been the way they were pulling off the effect with the fake wall or whatever, that it just needed to be slower. Either way, though, it does work well enough in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and then the continuation of the news report, we cut over to OCP Bob, and I love that they're talking about the new Delta City, like the OCP funded expansion to Detroit that's basically just going to be a brand new place. And they go to Bob, and Bob's just like, I don't know anything about that, but Robocop's really cool. And just like, all right, thanks for the sound bit there, Bob.
There's a new guy in town. Maybe you've heard of him. He's Robocop. Like, yeah, he's really selling his product, right? That's effectively what he's doing. It's after this though where Robocop has his first kind of. He's sitting back at the police station. He's in the chair. Where he stays.
Well, real quick before we get there, because character development wise, there's the bathroom scene in the executive lounge.
Oh, that was next. Okay, I would have brought that up when we go back to talk about those characters. But yeah. Bob's had a promotion because RoboCop's a hit, so he's got the key card that lets him into the fancy executive bathroom. And he's like laughing with this other executive, like, aha, yes. Oh, I think they both fill out their gold card at the same time, and they'd like, oh, look at us, and they tap them like they're, oh, look at, we're peas in a pod now. Yeah, we're gonna go piss together. And my favorite thing about this scene, the set design, the stock like ticker screens above the urinals so they can see the stalks as they're pissing.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I see this, it brings a smile to my face. It's just so on point satire. It's great.
I fully expect that at Wall Street. I expect that is a thing that exists. They saw that in Robocop. They're like, why didn't we think of that? God. But no,
we never have to take our eyes off the money. It's great.
Exactly. Perfect. During this whole conversation, Bob's just bashing Dick, just saying like, he's a pussy, he sucks. I'm taking over his job. He can't do anything. And then you just see everyone in the bathroom scurrying around because there's a pair of legs underneath one of the stalls that Bob didn't notice. And so when Dick finally comes out, the other guy he's talking to, it's still midstream, just zips up his pants. It's just like, I gotta go to a meeting now. Bye.
Yeah, he's got a big wet patch as well. It's like, be tough. Maybe hide your crotch till that dries. Just
it just shows he's dedicated to the job.
Oh yeah, he can't even wait to shake off properly. You have to just run back to work.
He saw the stock price drop by 3 cents, and he's like, "Oh, gotta fix that."
So they have this confrontation scene here where Dick's like, "Hey, you overstepped. You went above my head, and you better hope that thing doesn't like screw up. That Robocop. He better be good. But keep in mind." I'm number 2 around here, and the old man's nice and all, but he's going to die someday, and I'm going to be in charge. And when that happens, your days are numbered. So, it's a real confrontation scene. It really sets up this, because this is the thing. It'd be very easy to make Bob a better character in the sense that he's the one who actually creates Robocop. But this movie has made the very conscious choice of like, no, the person who created Robocop is a scummy piece of shit. Like he's the worst yuppie that you could possibly imagine.
That's the part that got me the most is I kept on, once we had this scene where Dick is so very clearly menacing, I expected the movie to then like personalize Bob to make him like more likable. No, he's still a dick. He sucks the whole way through, but he just sucks a little bit less than Dick does. And it's a perfect little capitalization on all of capitalism there, where it's like, up top, they all suck. You might get one that comes up with a good idea, though. And you just got to, like, let that guy do what he's going to do.
Yeah, I was giggling there because you were really dancing around some key words together that you didn't quite put them in the way that would have been problematic, but you did say, he sucks a little bit less than Dick, and I'm like, there's something about that sentence that just it's just speaking to me. Anywho, so we have that scene. Robocop has a nightmare, right? So he's sitting in the chair and he starts seeing like moments of Murphy's death, right? Of his death. And just see, and I actually love the first shot of this because he's just sitting there and you can just see in the monitors where they're monitoring stuff.
Yes.
The little glimpse of what's his face?
Clarence.
Clarence Boddiker's face. Just him shooting Murphy like just pops on the screen for a sec. It's actually a little bit creepy. It's got a little bit of a vibe to it, I thought.
Yeah. It's like I don't want to say like David Lynch directly, but like it does have that sort of horrific dream logic to it where it's, if somebody is able to literally plug into your dreams and see what you're seeing through a monitor and then you have a nightmare, it is very unsettling. I feel like that's the kind of way it would look. It's dark, grainy, and horrific. Yeah,
and like, all their measurements are all this, it's like a Richter scale's going off for his brain. We're like, oh, all this activity, what's going on? The brain scan's going wonky. And ultimately, Robocop gets up and leaves, and they try to stop him, but he clearly wants to go somewhere and do something. This has like affected him. And this is where he actually runs into Lewis. Lewis is like sort of taking a perpin, and she sort of makes a point of coming up to him and saying, hey, I've not had a chance to introduce myself. I'm Lewis. Do you have a name? And Robocop just kind of like, how can I be of assistance, officer? It's like, no, that's not what I meant. Do you have a name? And he moves on, and like some of the scientists are still running after him and screaming, and they're like, Lewis, did you speak to him? What did you say? What have you done?
Lewis does say it's like Murphy, right?
Oh, she does say his name, right? Yeah.
She does like straight up say it, and he reacts slightly. He like backs up slightly, but he's like, I have something I need to do. Bye.
Yeah. I think what's funny is that this doesn't directly lead to something yet. He actually has a chance encounter with one of the bad guys, which kind of prompts all this further in a bit. But they're very upset that he left, and Bob's pissed as well, and one of the scientists says, oh, maybe we have to shut him down for a while because we don't know how to explain this. And he's like, we're going to shut him down because of a nightmare? Are you crazy? No, he's out there doing good work. It's fine. And again, that just ties into this idea that he doesn't want to let any inconvenience get in the way of the capitalism side of his life. You know, like,
yeah,
absolutely. We're not going to stop for that.
Literally the thing that shut down Ed 209 was him having a glitch at an inopportune moment. If the same thing's happening to Robocop, nah, screw that. I am not going to put my head on the chopping block like that. But
even better than that, the thing that's literally showing up here that is the problem is that some of his humanity is still there, right? That's what it is. He's like, let's ignore the humanity because he's still my product and I still want to be successful.
Yeah, that's the part that I feel like the scientists, I would have like to see the scientist point of view on that, of them kind of, even if it's just hand wavy techno babble, like doesn't make any sense. I would have liked them to say why they think that they cleared out all the humanity, like why they think that this is 100% robot now. But they seem to keep on playing like just a little bit close to the vest by saying like, oh yes, we kept his police instincts in track, like we kept his that sort of stuff, and that's the humanity that's left. But none of that pesky memory of the life they lived before.
He is able to drive, which suggests that at least some of his skills from before are still there, unless they just uploaded them as well.
Which they could have. That's the thing, is they're very, because of that montage, they're very hand wavy about what is exactly the robot part besides like the heads up display that we get, and what exactly is the human part that's left over.
It would have been interesting, and I think other movies that have done similar types of concept would have had a scientist character who's more sympathetic, who maybe like cares about Robocop and would be someone who actually helps him at some point. And this movie doesn't do that, and I don't think it's missing that. But just in talking about this, you can kind of see how that could be a thing where maybe one of the scientists is more humane, sees him as more of a living thing.
I fully thought that female scientist that gave him a kiss during the New Year's party was going to end up filling that role. She was going to be the one that like is his advocate, but nah, it just never comes up.
No, it never comes up. So yeah, he's out patrolling, and the guy in the leather jacket, whose name is Emil, apparently. Yeah. I always remember these. He's got the baldy guy with the leather jacket. That's that one.
Yep.
He decides when he goes to fill up his bike that he just wants to rob the place as well. So he whips out his machine gun and he starts making fun of the guy because he's reading a book about geometry or something like that. And then this was actually a really good scene in some subtle ways, because he starts saying, oh, you're a college boy, you think you're smart, I bet you think you're really smart, that you can outsmart a bullet. It kind of like did a really good job of developing this bad guy is just insecure. Like this guy has said nothing, he's not even challenged him, he's just given him the money, he's clearly scared. But just the idea that he might be smarter than him makes him want to like say, oh, you think you're smart, I might shoot you just for you thinking you're smarter than me. Even though he's not said anything that would indicate that. He just feels so... It's like his dick's been measured just because like this guy might be smarter than him because he's educated. And that's it. That's enough to upset him. And the masculinity has to come out and be like, no, I'm tougher because I've got a gun.
Yeah, he feels insecure in any way, and that just doesn't sit right with him. So he needs to go with the one thing that he feels secure in, which is his power over other people.
As violence.
Violence.
Yeah, so Robocop comes swooping in. And again, much like much like Lewis recognized Murphy with the gun swirling.
No, it's not with that.
No.
When he first arrested
I know. I'm about to explain this, David.
Okay. All right. You said the gun swirling. I don't think he recognized the gun swirling.
No, he didn't. I said much like that.
Oh, sorry. Parsed the sentence wrong. My bad. Go ahead.
Because it's similar. Earlier on, when Murphy was trying to arrest him, he said, dead or alive, you're coming with me. And then here, he says the same thing. And, of course, he has this moment where he's like, wait a minute. I've heard that. I know you. We killed you. Which is actually kind of a fun moment, because it's kind of like, oh, like, the sins of my past are coming to get me, kind of thing. I like that. But yeah, this gas station just blows up. After the gunfire starts, this place just ignites.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that Emil just starts immediately firing at Robocop. But Robocop, he was caught off guard, because after Lewis said her thing of him being Murphy, and then this guy saying, we killed you, he like has a little crisis for a second. He like shuts down as he replays the footage. He's like, what? Am I human or am I robot? What's going on here? But then finally when he comes to, Emil has flicked a cigarette into the pile of gas and the whole thing just goes up.
Yeah, so we get the glorious shot of Robocop walking away with the explosion behind him. Obviously very traditional as far as actiony stuff goes, but it does look good, especially in these days where they did a real explosion of some kind.
Yes, absolutely. They blew up a gas station in Detroit just for the hell of it.
I mean...
But he does manage to arrest Emil, so he catches up to him and puts him in jail.
Yeah, but this, of course, leads him down a path, because after he's caught him and he's recognized him, he goes into like the police station's data banks or whatever this is, and he goes up and he's got like this spike that comes out of his hand, which is basically a USB stick, right? That's effectively what it is. It's a USB port, but we don't have those in the 80s yet, so it's a spike. It's a big metal spike.
I want to know what tech company thought that giant metal spike was the right way to do a connector. Because, like, it's not like this is a thing that it's just like, oh, Robocop has this, but it's only for Robocop. Like, no, there's a hole in this computer that he's able to jam it into, and it interacts. Like, these computers are designed to expect giant metal spike as a connector.
Yeah, there's a port there. Like, it's ready for him.
But that means these spikes have existed before Robocop, which is this, like, who? When did Windows say, hey, look, VGA, RSA, all these other port types, they're inconvenient. We introduce the spike.
Yeah, especially since the cops in the scene react scared when the spike comes out, like they don't know what it is. But if this is a common port in this world, then they should just know what this is and not
Can you imagine me menacingly coming up with a firewire cable and just being like, huh? You like that?
It'd be one thing if it was like just a system built for Robocop had this port, but this is like the police station's main computer. So it's, I don't know.
They explicitly tell him that he's not allowed back here. Like, there's no reason to expect Robocop should be back at this computer at any point.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I love it, right? And obviously it's used as a weapon later. But if I was to nitpick at any of the world building, this spike port thing is probably the thing that sticks out the most as this just feels forced because you set up this as a weapon for later.
Yeah.
You know?
It feels like the sort of thing where somebody who wasn't as technologically addled, like the person who was in charge of costume design says, and then he has a spike that can pop out, and they had to come up with some sort of reason as to why there would be a spike on a cop's thing, because otherwise it would feel way too brutal. Like if he's just throwing out spikes in the middle of a fist fight.
Yeah, maybe you could have done something where he's got like climbing things that come out so he can climb up side of buildings. So you have like...
That could work.
Yeah, you know, that would be a reason for something spiky, but I don't know.
Yeah. But either way, he searches through known associates, and he ends up with the entire crew and Clarence Boddicker as well.
Yeah, left for last, of course, and he really reacts to his face. And then he goes down his list of crimes, or victims, I should say, and he gets to Alex Murphy. So he actually looks at a photo of himself and sees his address, and he's had these quick flashes of this address in his head, like these little snippets of like the family waving goodbye. And I never even thought about this before this viewing, actually, but I was thinking that little snippet of the family waving goodbye, that's probably from the morning that he died. Like that's probably that day where he went to his first date at the new precinct, and they're saying goodbye. I was like, oh, that's really sad, because all the other memories we see, well, not all the other ones, because when he goes to the house, obviously he has an older memory, but like most of the other flashes we get of memory are all from that day he died. It's all like the people who killed him, so it would make sense that that little snippet's also just from earlier on that day, because it's more fresh and whatnot. But yeah, he goes to the address, he goes to the house that he lived in, and some of the great, just again, world building here is that it's empty, and it's got like sort of like computer screens that are like a showroom kind of thing, where it's clearly the house is for sale, they've moved out, and it's like the kitchen's completely empty and barren, there's nothing here anymore. He has some memories, of course, of taking this photograph at Halloween time with his son, and they sort of play that for the sad sort of emotional beats, although he punches the computer or the TV screen at the end that's trying to sell the house.
I really appreciate this for two reasons. One is that the house being up for sale, and they have all of these like plants and stuff around the house as well, and all of them are dead. So it's not just the sort of thing where like, oh, he just missed them. They just moved out like last week or something like that. Like, no, they moved out months ago. They have moved on with their lives quite some time ago. And then add on top of that, as they walk around and as he enters different rooms, it does like the slow fade to show a memory beginning and like him recognizing these things. It's always done from his POV. It's never like a third thing where we get to see Murphy walking around. It's always, here's how he saw this moment, and then we cut back to whatever triggered it in modern day.
And it's cold and empty.
And it's completely empty, white, and sterile. There's no like home or heart left at all here.
I think the other thing, two other things I like about this. One is that the fact that no one's moved in and the plants are all dead also suggests that this is a further little nugget about how no one's moving to Detroit because it's a shithole.
Yeah.
So it's hard to actually sell the house. So that's a nice little bit you can sort of take from that mythology-wise. And then the other thing I like, and this is, again, like, it would be so easy, much like I said, having a sympathetic, like, scientist character for Murphy would be a thing. I suppose you have Lewis, of course, to fill some of that role, but, you know, that's a little bit different. I think the other thing that it would have been very easy for this movie to do, and I think the remake might even do this, actually, now I'm thinking about it, but we'll get to that someday, is, like, it makes a conscious choice. The director, the writer, they've made a conscious decisions to not show him with his family. We only ever hear him talk about his family, and the only time we see his family are through fragmented visions of memory after he's already had them taken from him. So we are disconnected from that family. They are just these fragments of a person that's already gone. And I think that does a lot to add to the vibe of whenever he does think about them. It's like, it's not like, oh, we remember the heartfelt scene at the start when he said goodbye to them, and, you know, they're actual characters we can think about. They do genuinely feel gone. It feels like that life is lost in a way that, you know, really is emphasized by the fact that we don't even feel a tether to the life he had before, because we never saw that life.
Right. And that's something that's super good about how cold he starts out when he is Robocop, of how he doesn't have any of those memories or anything like that triggered yet, is that if we had spent time with his family, we would spend the entire time of it being a very melancholy thing, of him being like, oh, look, he doesn't have his humanity left. He's no longer a person. He doesn't remember his family anymore. But because we didn't spend that time with it, once he gets the triggers, that's also the triggers for us.
Yeah.
Like, we get to see that, and we get to develop at the same time with him of these growing emotions, this like growing as a character alongside him, rather than him just regaining something that we already knew about to begin with.
Yeah, it's a very fine line to walk, because if you don't show any humanity from him in the first like act of the movie, it means you don't care about him, and that would be bad too. You still have to want to care about him, but you also, in this case, don't want to go so far that we know his wife and kid well, and we consider him, like, you know, we just feel sad when he becomes Robocop.
Yeah, Robocop shouldn't be a tragic thing that happens to him. It needs to be something
not to
cool.
begin with. I think it feels tragic the more we learn about who he is, right? And the more we learn about what he's lost. But it's a very fine line to walk in either direction of, like, it not caring about him enough or solidifying his family too much that it feels like, oh, we already understand what he's lost. Because like you say, the idea that we start in that cold place where he's just Robocop, and you keep going, and as he learns and remembers things about his family, that's the first time we get them. It's like we're rediscovering his life along with him. But you do have to still make us care about the character in the first place, and that's why I think it's a very tight rope to walk in that first. So it's actually quite impressive they pulled it off as well as they did, because just a little bit more of the family life, because he mentions his son, he mentions, you know, just enough to give you some of those little nuggets of ideas, but if they'd went even just a little bit further, it might have been too much in the context of wanting to create that feeling that we're talking about now. So, very impressive in that sense.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Right, so we actually cut away from Robocop for quite a bit here, as we see, because this must be where Bob meets his demise, right? Around here, right? This is where. Because up until this point, obviously Clarence has been this villain, and we've seen a bunch of him in the context of shooting Murphy and whatever. But this is where we actually connect him to other characters in the movie, because he shows up at Bob's place. Bob's with a couple of models and they're doing a bunch of drugs. And Clarence walks in and is like, "Bitches leave," which is the line I know you wanted to mention earlier.
Such a good, because like, it's for no reason. They could have just left, but he had to put that little extra spin on it, and it just adds so much to it.
Yes, this is his character, right? He's got character.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, he very quickly shoots Bob in the legs, and Bob, before being shot in the legs, is like, "Don't you know who I am?" Right? And then he gets shot in the legs, and he's like, "Please don't kill me." Like, you know, the tone changes very dramatically, very quickly. But he puts a disc into the system, the TV system, and up comes Dick Jones. Clarence is working with Dick Jones, and we find out, you know, the corruption side of this is that the whole point of OCP building Delta City is like, oh, no, this is a new city with no crime. This is going to be like a paradise. But we find out here, and spread out over the next couple of scenes these characters have together, that no, he's already making deals with Clarence for Clarence to run all the new drug kingpin and the prostitution and all the other stuff. Like, this is a whole new empire and a whole new market for him to be a criminal in. Like, that's baked into this idea from day zero. It's not even something that's going to develop over time. So the corruption and the idea that the crime is part of the capitalism is just, you know, like, it fits so well with the themes of the movie, but it's like, okay, that puts that in perspective.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Clarence just casually pulls a pin out of a grenade and leaves it on the table before he walks out. And poor Bob tries to get to it, but it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. When you get your
up.
leg shot out, it's kind of hard to do.
He gets shot like 4 times in the legs as well. It's like 2 in each leg. He's pretty badly hurt.
Yep. I mean, I think this sequence, it shocked me, honestly, the first time I saw it, because I didn't think that, again, I thought that Bob was going to be turned into a more relatable character. I thought he was going to be someone that the audience could more root for, because we had established Dick was a bad guy. But then this scene happens, and it's like, okay, we've reestablished how bad of a guy Dick really is, but Bob's just gone. And it, much in the same way of like the corporate structure, nobody seems to really care. Like, this doesn't really impact things. No one cares that Bob's been killed. It's just, all right, well, moving on.
Well, no, I mean, I think the point of this is that, like, they're both assholes, and it's dog eat dog, and the guy that's further up the ladder just dealt with them, and that's it. I mean, it's not supposed to. We're not supposed to feel sympathy for Bob, because there's nothing sympathetic really about him. He's just a sleazeball who wants to be successful and screw over whoever he can to get there. It's just that Dick outscrews him, basically. He's already got ties to the criminal underworld, and he uses those ties here, and that's
it gives this idea that Bob was too much, like he set his sights too high too quick. He didn't learn about all the skeevy underbelly stuff. Like, he knew about screwing over each other, but he didn't know about like the actual illegal side of things that he needed to partake in order to succeed.
Yeah. So is it next where we're at the sort of, it's like the drug plant, right?
Yep.
Right. And Clarence is there with the rest of his goons, except obviously Emil, who's in prison right now. And they're making a deal with this guy with a ridiculous mustache who's just sipping on wine as they're making a deal for more distribution.
He's wearing like a flannel shirt too. Like, it's not like he's like this high pristine dude. It feels like the guy who ran a wood shop class is now just running this drug business.
But he likes a nice glass of red wine as he's doing his crime. But
absolutely,
again, there's a lot of character here where they're kind of like, you know, tensions are kind of rising. They kind of deflate again by the end of the scene. But you've got Clarence sticking his fingers in the guy's wine and being kind of vaguely threatening. They're pointing their guns at each other, but then they laugh it off. It's like, okay, I don't know how anyone enjoys being in this world, because you feel like you could just die at any point when you piss off the wrong guy. But sure, this is what it is. But of course, Robocop starts bashing into the door. Robocop's obviously had his eyes set on getting to Clarence and all of his goons ever since he started on this path. So he comes in, and we get the big scene where the main theme's playing, and he's doing trick shots practically. He's like shooting under his arm to get people up the walkways. It's a whole thing. So he takes out most of these goons. The main goons don't get killed, though, because they're still going to be around for later. Barring the one, there's like an Asian guy on the team who was there earlier, and he's here now to die. Was he there
earlier? I don't remember him earlier. But
he was in the firing squad when they were shooting at the at Murphy earlier on.
In that case, he does not get named, because he is again, he's killed here, and I don't remember him at all.
Yeah, I think he was Asian. I don't know. I mean, I may be slightly off there, but
no, you're right. You're right. Yeah. I see him. But like, even when they were going through the known associates list, they ran through like the 4 main guys. This guy, nowhere to be seen.
He's a villain red shirt, right? That's what he is, and he gets a lot of red on his shirt. Might I add?
Some would say several liters of it.
But the big main event here is that when he gets a hold of Clarence at the end, he just starts throwing him through windows, like just left and right.
I love how it's specifically like he goes through one window, picks him up, and then goes back through another window in the same room. It's just purposely dicking around with him of sending him through plate glass.
And of course, he starts trying to defend himself. He's like, wait, I'm protected. You're not supposed to come after me. I work with a guy in OCP. He's the senior vice president. He's Dick Jones. I'm protected. OCP owns the cops. You're not to come after me. So, of course, this gives Robocop all this information. And as Dick points out later, he records literally everything he sees and hears. You've just given him evidence that he can use to nail me to the cross. Like, this is it. So, yeah, but he brings in Clarence, and it's kind of a big moment because the cops are arguing about going on strike again in the police station, and they're saying that, hey, we need to do this. Cops are dropping left and right, and then Robocop just walks in, dragging this guy, and throws him to the desk and says, "Book him," and reads like, "What's the charge?" He's like, "He's a cop killer," and all the cops in the room just turn and look at him.
I mean, don't get me wrong. He is a cop killer, but I feel like the crime
that's not the charge. Yeah.
The charge there was shooting guns and like attempted murder and drug stuff. Like that's the charge right there.
To be fair though, they did say at the start of the movie, he's wanted for the murder of like 30 cops. So,
oh yeah.
So murder is definitely a thing. To be fair though, yes, the actual charge wouldn't be cop killer. It would just be murder, I presume. However, I'm going to read this, and I think this is the intention, is that Murphy, or Robocop, phrases it like this because he's thinking about his own murder. He's thinking about, no, he killed me. So I think that's why he phrases it that way on some level. So
also the fact that they were just talking about the strike as well. It just feels like he's relating that to him. Just being like, you guys want cops to stop being killed? Here you go. Here's one of them.
Yeah. So all very good. I think we skipped over a quick scene actually. The reason why he finds that drug bust factory place is because he goes to a nightclub where Leland Palmer is, and Leland Palmer tries to kick him in the nuts. And my favorite part of this, other than the fact that he gets dragged out by the hair at the end, which is really funny because he's screaming as he's getting dragged, is that when he first pulls out a gun to try and shoot Robocop just hits the gun out of his hand, and it lands in some random dude's hand, but the guy that catches the gun just keeps dancing like, I've got a gun in my hand now, hey, whatever.
Man, this is the best acid I've ever taken.
I'm like, I feel like if a gun landed in my hand out of thin air, I'd be a little like, what? Huh? What's happening? Why have I got a gun?
Well, clearly you're not on the right kind of acid.
Apparently not. So I just thought I'd mention that. So technically he's also been arrested at this point, and now Clarence has been arrested. But clearly Dick Jones is going to get them all free. That's like almost the next scene is him on the phone just being like, yeah, it's fine. Like,
it's like, the lawyer will get you out in 24 hours. Just shut up. And I got to figure out how to deal with Robocop.
Yeah. So Robocop goes straight to OCP, comes straight up to his office, barges in, and he's like, oh, you're wanted for aiding and abetting a known felon, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, these sound like serious charges. He puts out his hands and he goes, arrest me, officer, take me in. And this is when directive number 4 starts making Robocop freak out and glitch, and he starts collapsing. And it turns out that one of the prime directives is that he cannot try to arrest or harm a senior executive of OCP. It's like a defense mechanism that they've built in. It's not, and they specifically mentioned that Dick, like, this was his contribution to Robocop. Like, he wasn't really involved in making Robocop, but he wormed this code into him because he knew that the eventuality might be that he might get caught doing something. Yeah. So,
which I appreciate the fact that they say specifically that this isn't something that like the whole team came up with, because I think that would make it a little bit irredeemable in terms of like, oh, this is just Robocop's just a tool of the larger corporate system rather than a peacekeeping thing. But I also don't understand how the hell this old dude managed to get it into the system to begin with. Like, how did he manage to go in when nobody else was paying attention and say, like, by the way, you're not allowed to arrest anybody up top. That's just a thing.
I don't know. I mean, it's his department, so he clearly knows his way around computers and
fair.
robotics and shit. So I assume he's
I guess that's kind of the weird thing of this being set in the near future is I see a guy his age and I just assume that he doesn't know anything about technology, or at least not that level of technology. But if you go far enough into the future, eventually me and you are going to be his age. And
yes.
like we know stuff about technology, so maybe there's a chance he does too. Maybe he grew up with like a Nintendo Wii and he just kept on growing from there.
I mean, I just kind of like, they say it's his department. He developed Ed 209. Mm-hmm. That tells me he knows his stuff. So I don't worry about it too much beyond that. So then he brings in Ed 209 and is like, hey, you're going to have to fight him. And of course, as soon as they introduced Ed 209 earlier in the movie, I assume audiences at the time when this came out were like, oh God, we better see these two fight. We better see Robocop versus Ed 209. Notable though that Dick here does say, I killed Bob because he made a mistake. So now I have to kill you to erase that mistake. So we get another important recording on Robocop's memory just for later use. Very important.
So yeah, Robocop's getting thrown around by Ed. He's being shot through walls. Like, he's definitely not doing great. And then Robocop decides, well, I need to get out of here. And he goes to take the stairs, which, goddamn, who would have thought the Ed 209 would be upset by such a horrific villain as the stairs?
This is a perfect time to talk about the sound effects for Ed 209, because in the scene where he's introduced, there's a clear kind of like growl of like a big cat in the sound mix, right? You can hear it as he sort of leans forward. He's like a kind of like thing, like a lion or something like that. When he falls down the stairs and he's sort of like kicking his legs like a baby who's upset, you do actually hear like an animal who's like sort of like annoyed.
It's like a pig squealing sort of sound effect.
Yeah, really interesting choices, which I love that they made, because it just gives it this extra little bit of personality. I'm into it.
No, and I mean, even with like the metal clanking as well, sound effects for this, I mean, the stop motion as well, on point, but the sound effects mixed with it makes it just feel right there in the scene.
Yeah, So Dick did call in like police backup as well whilst this was going on. So when Robocop gets to the parking area and he goes through the door, there's just a row of cop cars all shining their lights in his face, and the SWAT team guy's there with his team. And it is notable that a couple of the cops who work at the precinct, the ones who have been talking about striking, say, wait, we're not getting involved in this. He's a cop, for Christ's sake. Like, what are we doing here? But I think this scene is probably the scene in this movie that I think it's not necessarily the best scene in the movie, because obviously there's a lot of great scenes, but I think it's the scene that feels the most poignant and is held up as far as its messaging goes the most, because they made Robocop, they made him to be a tool of the system, but the second the system decided he wasn't useful to them anymore, he's just destroyed. And in a world where we talk about, police brutality and things like that, this idea that now he's just the target. So you get like the sad version of the Robocop theme playing as they're just unloading like hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition at him, and it is affecting him. At a certain point, it is too much, and he's crawling on the floor, and he eventually just starts like rolling down the ramps to try and get like further down into the car park to try and get away from them. It's a really sad scene, and it feels kind of noted that the system is turned on him, right? Yeah. And the corruption from the top down has done this to him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing of like every good cop in a bad system story is that, they go out, they think they can make a change, they think they can really do some good, and then something in the system says, hey, you have to let this crime stand. You have to let this, like, you have to betray your values in order to let that happen. And obviously, the other three directives, as we've seen, can all coexist with each other. They're all things that are able to still allow him to be the best possible cop he can. But that fourth directive, once introduced, goes counterthetical to the uphold the law line of it. There's no way that he is not allowed to arrest these people if they broke the law. It's something that is just breaking him at his core. So once you get down here, and then you find out that the system itself has turned against him, I think that not only is it a great look at how, anybody who's going up and like, it's that saying of if you aim for the king, you better not miss sort of thing, of as soon as he went up against the big dogs, he was immediately turned upon. But then you also get the idea of him not being human, where it's not about the fact of whether or not these other cops are about to kill someone else, he's already dead. He's not a living thing. They don't see a problem with killing a product of OCP because he is not human anymore to them.
Yeah, but I think you can take that further and say he represents anyone someone sees as different.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
They should be looking at him as like a human being, but they're not, because he's just different. And I think that also helps with the themes of this quite a bit. Obviously, Lewis shows up in her car and like gets him out of Dodge. Like, she shows up to be the ally and gets him out of there. So big scene. The next morning, Clarence comes to see Dick, and I do love just that there's like workmen around the building, just like measuring the holes in the wall and like fixing the door up and all that and whatever. But Clarence comes to see Dick. I mean, I don't know if you want to say his brief interaction with the secretary for character purposes. He's a scumbag, obviously, but
absolutely. Like, if I ever meet a person who thinks that they are able to hit on someone while simultaneously sticking their bubble gum to their nameplate on their desk, that level of confidence is just beyond earthly means. Like, that man should just exist in some other plane of existence.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that both him and Lewis have a bubblegum kind of running thing, because she always keeps popping her bubbles and he just keeps sticking his gum in places.
I feel like with Lewis, it's meant to be a little bit of a character thing, just the tiny little quirk she has. With him, it's meant to make him look like an asshole.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for sure, yeah.
That's just the only reason he has it. He may as well just be like eating an apple, like one bite of it and throwing away the rest. That's just the level we're at with him.
We already talked about most of what's in this scene, which is the plans for the future, and also Robocop can like prove that I'm a bad guy, so you better deal with this. And Clarence doesn't want to do it. He's like, this is your mess. Why should I clean it up? He's like, yeah, because I'm going to give you like this new empire to like take over the city with, blah, blah, blah.
Here's a tracker, because that's super easy.
Yeah, I mean, which they established at the start when they first introduced Robocop. It's like, hey, we can track his location with this. So that explains how they're going to find him. He also asks for weapons, which leads to a scene where he goes and gets his crew, who are all been released from prison, and
it's not that they were released from prison just because, like, the lawyer or whatever. It's because of the police strike. The police have struck, and then, like, everyone's just running crazy now, and everyone who was in the holding cells just let free.
So he shows up with these futuristic military-grade sniper rifles that make things explode. And we get a whole scene here where he's with the others, and they're just nerding out over it. Like, basically, Emil and Cox basically start like fighting over one of the guns, even though we see in the later scene there's like 4 guns, so there's one for each of them. There's like no reason to fight, but they're man children, so of course they are. Before that part though, I do love that there's looting going on, and Emil decides, because he's watching the TV through the window, just to smash the window so he can hear it. And he's just like, I'll just stay here and watch some TV. I don't know. There's something just so casual about it.
I like how it's showing just that clear division of like small time to big time crime. Like, he knows that he's about to do a job with Clarence. He's obviously just waiting for Clarence to show up at this point. And he knows that he could, because we already saw him rob a gas station just on a whim. He could do that, but he knows he's part of this larger crew, and so he's just going to turn on the TV and wait for it. But he's no problem breaking the rules in the meantime.
And Cox is very excited because when he got out of jail, he stole a car from like the impound lot or something, and it's the car that was brought up in the negotiation later. And he's so excited about it, and he does this high-pitched thing with his voice whenever he's excited, where he laughs and says, "A new toy, can I play?" Like, he does like a really high-pitched thing.
Steve Urkel.
Yeah, and of course Clarence demonstrates his big new gun by blowing up his car, and he's very upset about it. But then they're just excited about the gun, so they start firing them all over the street, and like shops are blowing up, cars are blowing up, and like, okay, he's at the old mill, let's go and like kill this robot bastard, let's go do that. And that kind of, that's that side of it. The other side of it, of course, is that yes, he is at the mill. Lewis is hiding him out here. She's brought him baby food because it's similar to the paste that he eats, because he does need to eat. There's
he needs energy.
There's still enough of a human part of him that he does need some sustenance, and that's what this paste is.
I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, obviously you may have already seen the reboot, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just eventually switch over to like a solar power thing, because it seems really weird that he has to eat baby food.
I like it in the context of this movie. I do not remember what the remake does with it. I do not remember. But
maybe it just doesn't come up.
Yeah, he, he's targeting Zoff. She helps him a little bit. He asks some questions about his family, which I think is the most important thing here, is that he's like trying to connect. And it's notable here that when he was fighting Ed 209, he gets like a crack in his mask and you can see his eye for the first time since he became Robocop. Here, he chooses to take off the helmet part, the front part of it, which, by the way, maybe the most impressive like makeup effect.
Oh my god, yeah!
In the movie is like his face when he's got the helmet off. And you can see like the skin kind of attached to like the back part of the robot, and it just looks really good and convincing. It obviously they've put in extra skin that then connects to this stuff, but it legitimately creates the illusion that the back of his head is skinnier where the robot part is, and like the face is wider. Obviously that's not true, but it feels like it, and it looks convincing. It's really good. It's impressive.
Yeah, no, I have absolutely no notes on that. It is amazing to me how well that was done. Because even when you just explained it, you explained it exactly as it is, where it's obviously just like a casing around his head and then they puff up his skin a little bit. But like, it looks so good. It's stand up well after the point where it logically should have started like faltering in terms of modern special effects. It just look like we just did The Creator a couple months ago. This is like better than the way that those looked in terms of it's practical and yet it still is just so believable.
Also, we did The Creator 2 weeks ago, David. Come on now.
All right. Well, spoiler behind the thing, we record out of order.
Well, we don't usually go out of order for that much, but this was just a case where things got screwed up.
We did Creator before we did those two new releases of Furiosa and Atlas, one after another. So it's been a while.
Yeah. So he asked about his wife and kid, and she's like, yeah, they moved away after the funeral. They thought you were dead. She had to move on. And, it's kind of sad, but he has like a little line here at the end of this scene that I really liked where he says, I can still feel them, but I can't remember them. And I'm like, oh man, like it's the humanity's there, but he's been cut off from that experience. And it's funny how it was taken from him by the bad guys who shot him, but then it's also taken from him again by everyone who made him Robocop. So there's I think it's double sort of like feeling to that. Even in death, he wasn't allowed to be free. He had to still be part of the system.
Yeah, and that's part of the plot that like when he was walking through the house and all that, I thought the exploration for a good part of this movie was going to be him trying to reach back out, trying to find where his family went and reestablishing ties to them. But honestly, by the time we get done with this movie, I'm kind of glad that they didn't go that route, because it would have just kind of cheapened it a little bit. Like, I think that him having to come to terms with the fact that, like, who is he first, whether he is like a robot who just thinks that he's Murphy, or if he is actually still Murphy underneath it all, having him come to terms with that before he even thinks about going to his family, that seems much more important to me. Yeah.
No, I think it was a wise choice. So the bad guys show up, of course. They come in with their guns, and so Cox goes down first. Robocop basically throws a bit of metal to make them look the other way and takes a shot at him.
He throws a bit of metal the other way, distracts them, and then calls out with a one-liner, being like, looking for me. And it's like, bro, you had your element of surprise and you threw it away for a one-liner.
He's still doing his superhero thing, like for his kid, right? It's just ingrained in him. Obviously, the big thing everyone always talks about with this, though, is when Emil drives the truck. Like, Robocop sort of dives out the way as Emil's trying to run him over with the van, and he goes into the big barrel or vat of toxic waste. And you see it pouring out of the van, but you do see him come out of the van afterwards, and his face is like melting. But the best part of it, though, is that then when Clarence is in a car, he hits him, right?
Yep.
Unintentionally, but he hits him with the car, and he just splats over the windscreen. Like his molecular structure has been weakened so much that he just splats like he's a bucket of paint.
It's so unnecessary. Like, he could have just as easily died when Robocop like swerved out of the way, and then all of a sudden, he's hit with toxic waste and he just dies because of his injuries. But of course, they had him get up as this Cronenberg nightmare and start like interacting with Leland Palmer, and then gets hit by the car and, like you said, explodes. None of that is necessary, but you just know that they looked at that scene and they thought, oh, we could do something here. We could make this a big thing.
I love it. Never dare touch it. It's perfect.
Yep.
It's perfect.
I mean, I will note the comparison bit here for director's cut to theatrical.
Yeah.
No changes made. There was no difference between the two cuts when it comes down to that guy's sequence, which it seems to me like that would have been something he fought for. He's like, look, I'll cut down the shooting of Murphy down to like nothing if it's going to help me keep this all intact.
I think it probably comes down to the fact that someone being melted by toxic waste and then getting hit with a car to explode is so fantastical compared to just getting riddled with bullets, which is a more realistic, that can happen to you kind of thing. That's probably why it wasn't seen as vicious to the minds of the MPAA, I would expect.
That's fair. And I mean, let's also be grateful that we weren't over in the UK and someone had a pair of nunchucks, because dear Lord, couldn't have that.
Oh yeah, like the censorship in the 80s and early 90s in the UK was absolute. Like, there's so many action movies that were cut. Lethal Weapons, Under Sieges, like just anything with a headbutt was just treated like, oh no, that's just like, that's too much. You can't have that.
That's crazy to me.
It's all changed though. Everything's like uncut now, but like, you know, the Margaret Thatcher era was a rough one.
I'm surprised we made it out as unscathed through the Reagan years as we did, and that's saying something.
Yeah, Thatcher was basically just British Reagan. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, no, it was a bad... The 80s were bad. Yeah. Like, as much as the films industry was booming and, like, made it all cool, it was bad.
Yes. Rough times. So, yeah, I mean, the final showdown, ultimately, Clarence does shoot Lewis, right? She takes a couple hits, and by this point, they're kind of at this sort of, like, quarry area next to the mill, and there's, like, a sort of pool of, like, dirty water at the bottom of it. But you get, like, Robocop coming through the water, and Clarence is kind of trying to like talk to him and sort of basically stall, because Leland Palmer's gone up to this crane thing to try and drop this pile of metal rubble on top of him.
Well, it also feels like he does have a bit of genuine fear as well, because Robocop's coming at him. He's like, all right, arrest me if that's what you got to do. He's like, I'm not arresting you anymore, dude. Like, I am no longer affiliated with that level of the police.
Yeah, we're past that point. And the rubble does come down, but as this is happening, Lewis is crawling because Clarence's sniper rifle has, like, you know, dropped out of the car when they crashed, and she's crawling towards it, and she gets to it just in time and fires a shot. Well, it's actually, I said just in time, it's not, it's too late for stopping him, but after he drops the rubble down in Robocop, she fires this, and they're basically celebrating. The villains are yelling at each other, going, yeah, we did it, we took the asshole down, and then she fires this shot and blows up this little, like, control room that he's in, and he just dies instantly, and Clarence looks just pissed, but Robocop's not dead yet. He's still sort of sitting there just pinned down with the rubble. And
can I jump in real quick? I want to see a recut so badly of like a moment from Twin Peaks at the sawmill, and then just throw in that shot of Leland Palmer just like, yeah.
Bum, 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 bum. That's a different song, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to do Twin Peaks. So he comes up with a metal pole and starts trying to beat up Robocop, and Robocop's kind of defenseless, but this is where he whips out his USB spike and stabs Clarence in the neck.
Yep.
But my favorite part of this, though, and this again, what I love about this movie is the human element is still so good, because his concern for Lewis afterwards, where he's yelling over at her, you know, to see if she's okay, it really does feel like he's become more human by this point, and he's like, Lewis, like, and she's like, oh, I'm beat up pretty bad, Murphy. But, you know, she's fine. She's not dead.
Yeah. He's just like, oh, they'll fix you. They can fix anything.
But the finale of the movie is him going to OCP, because obviously we still have to deal with Dick. And he comes in, Ed 209's there, and it's a great symbolic thing for how much more confident Robocop is at this point. He's brought one of those big sniper rifles that blow things up, and he just whips out the sniper rifle and blows up Ed 209. We get the great shot of the legs on its own before it kind of tumbles over, and is like, like, so all very good. Because Dick's up in the boardroom, he's saying, hey, we've got all these Ed 209s. He's fully taken charge. They've discredited Robocop now because Robocop tried to, like, you know, I don't know what the story is, but presumably they've just said Robocop tried to kill him or something, and that's why he had to be taken down. Robocop comes in, he walks over to the computers, puts his USB spike in, and plays back the confession. I mean, he says, oh, you're, you know, charged with murder, and the old man's like, oh, that's a very serious charge. You got any evidence? And as soon as this evidence appears on the screen, Dick grabs the gun from the box that's still sitting there, grabs the old man as a hostage and is like, blah, 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 blah. And Robocop specifically said, I can't, like, arrest or take charge against someone who works at OCP. So we have this hostage situation, and the old man just yells out, Dick, you're fired.
Robocop just says, thank you. Bang.
Yeah, and then just shoots him. And maybe the only effect that's probably aged a bit is the shot of Dick falling out of the building, where it's like a claymation thing, and his arms look too long. I mean, I love it. It's got a lot of charm. But
like, I noticed it as well, that his arms were definitely too long.
I think it's like stop motion. I think they used stop motion for his death.
Why are his arms so long, though?
They misjudged it. They thought Ronny Cox is got long arms. That's what they thought, but they overjudged it, and there it is.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a great scene, though, just all round. But
I love how it keeps cutting back to the friend of Bob, like the one who shows up in the later movies.
Oh, yeah, Johnson,
Yeah, Johnson. He's just loving it. Like, he's just smiling the whole time, and as Dick goes out the window and falls to his death, he just smiles, turns to Robocop, and gives a thumbs up. He's just like, yeah. There's
a reaction shot of him sort of standing up and smiling in between the gunshots as Dick's being shot. It's like he's clearly, because he's not really been like, he was just there for Bob to talk to more than anything else. He wasn't really that much of a character in this movie. But this is like the moment where he gets a bit of character, because he's clearly just happy that Dick's been taken down, and he's like, go Robocop, go.
Yeah.
So there's still a bit of that cynicism here, but the old man like straightens his tie and says, nice shooting, son, what's your name? And the final moment of the movie is Robocop turns a question he could not answer earlier and just says, Murphy. Cut to the title and cut to the main theme. And it's perfect. The movie ends with him reclaiming his individuality. Now, the fact that sequels exist is kind of a shame, because in a way, the sequels existing in any way, no matter what they do with them, it's going to devalue this ending, because, like, you know, obviously, I don't think about that when I'm watching this movie. This movie was designed as a standalone movie. This is meant to be the end of the story. The fact that the sequels exist don't matter. But it's the sort of thing when you're watching the next one, you'll be like, yeah, it doesn't feel like that was as perfect an ending, because we're introducing all these other problems now, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I guess without any knowledge for me of what is actually in the sequels, I can see a way that they can do good sequels here while still examining those same sort of themes. Like I was saying, I think that him having to come to terms with whether or not he's Murphy or a robot before he deals with his family aspect, like this, he's come to that conclusion now. He realizes that he's still Murphy, and that then allows him to explore the family aspect, to go searching for them again. I think there's potential there. Whether we see that or not, so be it. But the way that you're describing it, I do think that having what is most likely going to be OCP making more stuff that RoboCop's going to have to fight against, like more, like, not Ed 209 again, but like, you know, they keep on trying to capitalize and do bad things and such. It does devalue it in a little bit, like you're talking about there. It does make it just a little bit lesser.
As with almost any movie that was great and then got sequels, while the sequels are good or bad, it's always best to think of the original film on its own terms, because that's how it was made. That's how it was released. It was released as a single movie with an ending, and it is a perfect ending to this story.
Unless it was anything Sony put out in the 2010s.
Yeah, well, that's different, because that's the franchise chasing trend and all that. But and this is not to say that I don't enjoy the sequels, or Robocop 2 at least, because there's fun stuff in them, but it's not this great movie with the satire and all the subtext and everything that this has been doing, and the great human heart of the story. So, I mean, I'll be curious to see. I have not seen Robocop 2 and 3 in a long ass time, so I'm actually very curious to see when we get there how I feel about them. But they're definitely not going to be anywhere close to on par with this first one, which is a special movie that's entered pop culture for a reason, because it has all the cool design elements that people remember, but the movie itself is great. It has a great story, it has a great message, it has all these things on top of the great special effects and memorable characters. Even the goons, like all the bad guys' goons are all somewhat at least the main three are, right?
Yeah.
You know, Leland, Palmer, Emil, and Cox, that they all have memorable personalities.
That's it. Even just they're recognizable. Like that's the thing of Like the actors, save for maybe Cox, but like everyone on the other ones went on to do something. Like they didn't just show up here as random goon number two. They had the personality that allowed them to keep going throughout their careers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, you could. See, I didn't really know. Not Cox. You just said Cox. The other one, Emil. I don't think I really knew him from anything, but apparently he was on ER for like a decade. So
yeah, he was like a main doctor guy there. He had the most hilarious death because I've seen clips of it. I didn't watch ER, but apparently he was killed one day. He was a dick the entire time. That was his whole character. He just sucked as a person. And then one day he walked out of the hospital and a helicopter landed on him.
Very good. I think I think I've seen that clip actually. Now that you've brought that up,
there you go.
I feel like it's been shared for being stupid. Yeah. Okay. I mean, RoboCop's fantastic. I mean, I think we've clearly defined that over the course of the last 2 hours.
Yep.
David, what are you going to rate RoboCop?
For me, I think it's super solid. I really do enjoy it the whole way through. I don't know if it's just because I don't have as much nostalgia as you. I do feel like I didn't quite get as much of like amazingness out of it. It doesn't quite hit me in that same way as feeling like this really has something deep to say, or this really has like this incredible thing to it. I think it's phenomenal in what it does, but it didn't quite hit me in that same like deep level that it seems to be hitting you. I will, however, still give it I think I'm going to give it an 8.5. It doesn't crack that 9 barrier for me. I really do enjoy it though. But I think that there is just, maybe it's just how like the theming of it, of whether or not it is going against like the system aspect, it kind of feels like it's playing both sides there. But I don't want to sound negative on this. It is just a super solid film throughout. And I can see why it is something that people remember fondly from that era. It's something that hasn't been forgotten, like, you know, Buckaroo Banzai or whatever else has come out in the 80s and just disappeared as quickly.
Did you intentionally pick a Peter Weller movie?
I did, because I've been staring at it on screen with my Peter Welling page this whole time.
Yeah, I am going 9 out of 10. For me, it's an amazing movie. It's obviously I'm not giving it a 10, but you know that's a special
right.
club to be in. But I do think it's fantastic. I think it is Paul Verhoeven, at least as far as the ones I've seen, it's Paul Verhoeven's best movie. I think it holds up remarkably well. If anything, it's maybe even gotten better with age, just because I think people think about the themes and what this is talking about more than they even did back at the time. Or maybe it just feels that way because I grew up and I started thinking about it more as I got older. But it definitely feels like with age, I've appreciated it more and more. So,
right.
No, and it has all the cool fun stuff as well. The designs, the robots, the makeup, the action, all that stuff's great. So, yeah, 9 out of 10 for me. That is RoboCop. So the plan is to do the sequels and even the reboot later down the line. We'll probably do RoboCop 2 later this year because we want to do 80s movies this year because we're going to do an 80s list at the end of the year. But 3 in the remake will probably wait until sometime next year. So they'll be spread out, but we'll get to them. But that is RoboCop. David will do his homework in a second, but before we get to that, I'll just do a couple of things. One, I will tell you that next week on the show, we've got a Patreon vote winner, and we're doing Robinson Crusoe on Mars. So we're going back to the 1960s and doing something a little bit cheesier, perhaps, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Also, I'll just pimp out the Patreon and stuff again. If you want to support the show and help keep it coming, wouldn't be able to do this without the support on Patreon or via YouTube memberships. You can get bonus shows every month from me and David, including the Criterion Cut, where we review Criterion Collection movies, which, by the way, RoboCop is technically one, so you should have been wearing your jacket for this episode.
Is it Criterion? Wow, okay.
It was a very early DVD that went out of print, because even by the time I was buying DVDs, it was already out of print, but it did get a Criterion. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll see a nice photo of the old DVD.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was this and Silence of the Lambs had early Criterions that got quickly out of print as MGM decided to just start releasing stuff on their own.
They saw how much money Criterion was making. They're like, hold on now.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
And then it's funny, it's kind of flipped reverse because Silence of the Lambs has had a new Criterion in the last few years, like on 4K Blu-ray, and it's basically showing how things have changed, where it's more niche now to buy physical media, so they're back to just letting like boutique labels do it instead of doing it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it as long as it gets a good treatment when it comes out, and it's not just
sure.
like, here's like 3 bonus features and whatever.
Yeah, by the way, Robocop looked good in 4K. It's not the iTunes version doesn't have HDR, but the 4K resolution did look really nice and sharp. You know, it was pretty. And then also the other bonus you can get is extra reels. Once a month, me and David will do some of the worst movies of all time. So check out that too.
Love it.
So yes, David, you have a homework movie every week where you go back and watch a sci-fi movie that we did on the show before you joined, so you can catch up and be more aware of things, especially when we do things like best of lists. So David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, as you may know, there's a new Alien movie coming out.
Oh,
down
yes.
the line. And I did the 4 base Alien movies, and I thought, well, that's it. That's all I need to do. But I was reminded that there were other Alien movies. So now that I have completed the 2 prerequisite Predator movies to get to this point, I did 2003's Alien vs. Predator by another famous Paul director.
Yes, Paul Anderson. Not T. Anderson, W.S. Anderson.
Yep. So, funny story about this one going in. I didn't realize that Paul W.S. Anderson directed it. And it got to the point where, the main plot started kicking off, and it's in this temple, and the temple like rearranges itself, and they got to find a way out and all that. I'm like, why is this reminding me so much of the first Resident Evil movie? And then it clicked. Everything just clicked into place there. So, long story short, no. Please no. I don't want to do Requiem before I have to do...
Oh, you have to, though. You have
Romulus?
to. See, here's the thing. This movie looks like Citizen Kane when you watch Requiem. So you have to watch Requiem. You have to.
All right. If I'm doing actual critical stuff here, I will say that I think that this movie has a super good concept in like the Vegas sense of Aliens versus Predator. I think that is something something really cool could have been done with.
I broadly like the idea of a predator ultimately working with a human because ultimately the alien's the bigger threat.
I'm okay with that. I think you don't even yes, you need to have humans to just be in the middle of it, but I don't even think the predator has to work with the human. I think it could just be like, they're just trying to survive.
I think it works. I think it's a fine idea. I just, it's Paul W.S. Anderson. Like, I remember when we reviewed it, Tara got annoyed at me because I kept comparing it to Aliens, but I do think that movie especially is trying to do the Aliens thing where this is our group of colonial Marines. So, but they're so just flat and unlikable versus the colonial Marines and Aliens. Like, he just doesn't know how to do it. It's just bad.
I think my biggest problem is even if we were going back to the first Alien, there is zero horror in this movie. There's absolutely no terror. And then add on top of it, the action just feels so... I don't want to say CGI'd because obviously that doesn't mean anything implicitly, but you get what I mean when I say it.
Like, it's just so slick and no impact. It's all just fluff.
Exactly. Like, especially ever having watched Predator and Predator 2 so soon after each other, like, I felt those impacts. I felt how much of it was practical. It really felt impressive there, even though they involved a lot of CGI. This, though, like, the Predators themselves were not CGI. They were almost always actually there. Meanwhile, everything they did with all of their weapons was 100% CGI'd, and it just felt so cheap the whole way through.
What do you think was CGI in Predator?
I'm like the camouflage stuff and like the thermal vision, all that. It's not CG? The camouflage stuff?
No, that's like an optical effect. That's not CG.
Okay. I thought for sure the camouflage, like the thermal stuff, yes, I get that that's just, you plug in a thermal camera, but the camouflage stuff I thought for sure was CG. But
it definitely has a look to it. It definitely looks more like it's not, I'm pretty sure it's not CG. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of CG helping it, but I'm pretty sure it's more like just an optical effect, I'll call it, for lack of a better term.
That's fine. Yeah. That's fair. Regardless, my critique with it still stands in that it all feels so slick and so just thrown off a conveyor belt, more or less. It's just completely the cheapest thing imaginable. And then add on top of it, I won't spoil it, but like the final set piece of the movie It's just like, really? You're going that big that quick? Whatever. Fine. So all in all, I think I'm going to give this one like a 4. I did not enjoy it, and I definitely do not look forward to Requiem before Romulus comes out.
4 sounds about right. I was just double checking because I wanted to check how they did it. So basically, they shot someone in a red suit because it's the opposite of green, basically, of the jungle, and they just chroma keyed out the suit on the plate of the thing, but there's still like a sort of like halo effect,
like a
to
shimmer.
It. Yeah,
okay,
right. So it was just old fashioned camera trickery for the most part.
Yeah,
which is
and
fun.
I mean, all the more impressive to him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm don't get me wrong. I'm sure if you watch Predators or The Predator, I'm sure it's just CG in those ones because they're newer. But
I am going to put those off until I absolutely have to.
Yeah, but you can't get to Prey unless you do those two.
I specifically asked you whether I could get to Prey without doing those two, and you said probably. I mean, do I have to?
Like, as a recommendation for the world, should they watch Prey and just skip those two? Yes, because it's a good movie. But you specifically, when you're going to have to watch those two movies anyway at some point, you might as well do it in the right order.
All right, and the damn show,
because you'll appreciate.
I said end the damn show. I'm done with this.
You'll appreciate. You have to go through the misery and the torment of those two movies to get to Prey, because then you'll appreciate it. I mean, Predators isn't tormentful. It's just not good. But regardless, yes. Anyway, that's the show, everyone. Thank you. Did you rate it? Oh, you did. 4 out of 10. You did, yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We do appreciate it. This has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. We'll see you next week, like I said, for Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Something a little bit different, and then we'll see from there. But that's the show. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching science fiction. And somehow we got through all of this review without saying this, so I'm going to end it with it. I'd buy that for $1.